And we're back for another rousing adventure in Debate City here. Yeah, if you guys recognize a couple faces here, well, actually, Ahmed, you're actually the one back from last time. But we're going to try this again. We're gonna mix it up a little bit. We've got the wonderful, the amazing, the brilliant Tony Reed with us. You thought I was going to say Jackson Wheat, didn't you? You did, didn't you? I saw that. But no, I'm a huge fan of your channel. You know I love your videos a lot. And I think it's going to be fun. So I do got Jackson Wheat, who I actually love his videos as well, to kind of help out with this particular topic because he knows his shit. And so you guys have got a little presentations. And the topic is going to be, does evolution make beneficial predictions? Now, before we even start, will one of you please make sure that we're all on the same page here, because I want to make sure that you're talking about the same topic, about evolution making beneficial predictions as respect to the environment or with the humans. Either one works, just as long as you're on the same page.
We both discussed this as well, and we both decided that we were talking about. He likes to put it as macroevolution. I'm saying common descent. Essentially, what I'm saying that all life, the assumption that all life shares a common ancestor. Whether you want to call that macroevolution, fair enough, but that's what we decided on. And so, as far as to the environment or to people, I kind of have a bit of both in my presentation.
Ahmed, you good with that?
Yeah, so it's the whole thing about believing that, you have common descent with modification by random mutation and natural selection. This is what we're looking at, not small adaptations in species, but the bigger picture. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So
believing or accepting that make real beneficial real life applications to humans.
Sounds good to me. All right, we're going to dive into this. Let's get going. Who's going to go first here?
I guess, well, I mean, I don't think Ahmed can go unless I have something for him to say that's not true. Is that
makes sense. No, I'm okay. Well, you guys are going to be, you guys definitely be kind of arguing both positive cases, but in your own schema. So anyways, how about we let Tony go first? Is that cool? Finding truth?
Fair. That works for me. So I got to relearn myself. Go ahead.
Typically, the affirmative would go first, so I would go for Tony first, sure.
Yeah, typically you're right, but you guys are both making well, in this particular case, he's making the affirmative, you're making the negative. But do you mind?
All right, so
I'll be happy to start.
Let him ahead. You don't mind if Tony goes first?
No, I don't mind.
Awesome. Let's do this.
Okay. So I guess I'm starting. Before I get started, though, I do want to say thank you to both Jackson and Steve McCrae, fans of both your channels. Both of you guys, when you guys have videos coming out, first thing I do is put it to the top of my list. Did I get disconnected?
No, but I think Ahmed started. Tony was going to go first, so he's going to present first. Did we decide? Am I confused here? Okay, I'm not confused.
But I do want to say thank you to Ahmed. This is we've had a pretty good road up to now, and so I'm going to go ahead and get started now. And so, can you guys see my screen? Is it started?
Yes, sir.
Yet?
Yes, looks wonderful, amazing, perfect.
Okay, so you're going to probably see my mouse down here because I'm just using the picture displayer, the picture user. But at any rate, the topic today is whether evolution makes beneficial predictions. Now, in our own conversations, Finding Truth has already stated creationism isn't meant for real-world applications. So for those people who have asked for this discussion, we're focusing on the applications for evolution, whether it's true or not. Now, when we discuss an application or scientific application or scientific prediction, we're talking about the confirmation of a scientific prediction made by the theory. And this is how new discoveries and real-world applications are made. Essentially, it's really easy to see evidence and then make an explanation for it. It's a completely different thing to use that explanation and then predict the future, predict something that has never been seen before, go out and find it. And that's how you know that your explanation is at least somewhat right. And so today, I'll be starting not with a prediction of evolution, but ironically with a creationist prediction. And so we'll start. In the 1700s, it was obvious there were far more living species on Earth than could fit on an ark. Even farmers at the time were aware that the morphology of their own crops and livestock had changed over time. And this here is Carolus Linnaeus, a Swedish botanist, as most of you probably know. He decided to test the notion of created kinds by examining organisms associating each species together into what he called genera by their physical traits. Genera essentially equating to the biblical kinds. Now, he was surprised that these different genera also shared common characteristics that unified them into larger groups of orders and then into classes, forming a nested hierarchy. And through this, he unified all animals into one kingdom, all plants into their own kingdom. And although Linnaeus failed to actually discover the biblical kinds, the result of his work gave naturalists a tool that made more sense of biology. Charles Darwin is famous for proposing that there's an explanation for this, which is that these nested hierarchies, they're the result of life descending, all of it from the same ancestor. How do you test an explanation like this, though? That's the second part of it. Well, with the discovery of DNA, instead of classifying organisms by their physical features, the notion of comparing sequences to test for relationship was put forward in 1958 by Francis Crick, who was one of the two discoverers of the DNA helix. In 1977, Carl Woese and George Fox published a paper doing exactly that. And they did that by comparing the ribosomal RNA of different species. This showed that all organisms that they had examined were using genetically calculable variants of the very same sequence, implying relation. Now, by 1984, the first genetic paternity test was performed, showing that DNA was effective in determining relationship verifiably. And to this day, we use this test to legally determine relationship between people. This is also the same method that we use to determine relationship between species. So it actually constitutes legal proof of common descent. But it goes a little further than that. The theory of common descent made a further prediction in the DNA regarding convergent evolution, which neither creationism nor Linnaean taxonomy ever predicted. A genetic indicator of relation is the continuity of genes. Hox genes are an example of this. The Hox genes that code for limbs and extremities in your own body can be traced through every tetrapod, whether fish, amphibian, reptile, bird, mammal. This was already observed. But contrary to this, if common descent were true, similar structures between two species that are not closely related should be coded for by different genes. And that is, in fact, what we see. For example, microbats, whales, shrews, they all possess sonar-like echolocation. All are coded for by different genes. The bills of a duck and the bill of a platypus are coded for by different genes. Gills in fish, some crustaceans, and even some mollusks are all coded for by different genes. The list goes on. There is no reason to expect this from a common designer, nor from mere Linnaean taxonomy. Now, common descent has also predicted several specific fossils in specific strata and in very specific locations before they were discovered. Previously, the lobe-finned fish, Eusthenopteron, was known from 385 million year old strata. Ichthyostega was known from 365 million year old strata. And based on these two discoveries, three paleontologists were able to go predict that they should be able to find a fossil of a creature which appeared to have tetrapod wrist bones, rays instead of digits, spiracles in the head for a lung system, as well as a head extending from the body by a neck. And they predicted that this combination of tetrapod and fish traits would be found stratigraphically between Ichthyostega and Eusthenopteron somewhere on Ellesmere Island in northern Canada. Now, 5 years later, they found exactly that. They found 3 individuals with those exact traits. They named them Tiktaalik. And this methodology is how scientists develop all these proposed lineages that you see on display. They predict where to look stratigraphically as well as geographically for undiscovered fossils every day. And this is done in part with the integration of uniformitarian principles, which also require an old Earth. They're used every day by geologists. They predict where to use seismic surveys, magnetometers, gravimeters, and geochemical processing to find minerals like oil and coal. So if you drive a car, you use electricity, you're benefiting from the scientific application of old Earth geology. One last item that was actually in the headlines, in 2013, Kali Hardig was admitted to the hospital after contracting a brain-eating Naegleria fowleri, which has virtually 100% mortality rate. And the doctors, they essentially put her on ice. They slowed her metabolism. They requested a drug called miltefosine. Now, miltefosine is used to treat a disease called leishmaniasis. It's affecting several systems in the body, ironically not the brain, but it's caused by a bacteria known as leishmania. Both are members of the same phylum. The assumption that these two species were distantly related had been used to propose this treatment for Naegleria by Frederick Schuster and Govinda Visvesvara in 2007. The 2000 incident with Kali Hardig was the first ever treatment, and it saved her life. So essentially, the assumption of common descent saved life. Even in electronics, random mutation, natural selection are actually used every day to design better electronics, mechanical systems through what are known as evolutionary algorithms. This method of design allows minuscule mutation and selection to test the product, the function, and efficiency of random designs through repeated generations of the product. So for example, also in 2007, a team led by Pierre Legrand at the University of Bordeaux, France, developed an evolutionary algorithm to configure the electrodes for cochlear implants. I have that in the lower left. Legrand's team took just 1.5 days to configure an optimal pattern for one patient, and their doctor hadn't succeeded in over 10 years. The use of evolutionary algorithms is actually so effective that critics argue that the technique may lead to designs that can't be properly evaluated, since no human understands which trade-offs were made and therefore where failure is likely. So it's actually a better designer than intelligence. So yes, common descent, the processes of random mutation and natural selection do have applications that you do indeed benefit from, whether it's the settling of a family affairs, whether it's the treatment of disease, electronics, or even in combination with other theories to make new discoveries by making falsifiable predictions about the real world. So no, evolution does not hijack science, as my opponent has claimed. All of this was accomplished by this simple process on your screen right now that we call the scientific method. So even if you accept creationism 100%, you're still benefiting from the confirmation of these predictions, whether or not common descent is true. And that's my presentation, my friends.
Wow, Tony coming out of the gate hard and fast on that one. That was pretty, by the way. Pretty presentation. Not sure I understood any of it because I'm limited in my understanding of biology, but no, that was actually really, really good. But Jackson, you want to throw in anything real quick? I forgot to introduce you at the very beginning. My bad. Mea culpa, my friend. So do you want to say hi to everybody? But you're not.
Hello, everybody.
There. All right.
I am paying attention.
I am taking notes as well. I am actually taking notes. So finding truth. Looks like you got your work cut out for you because Tony came out of the gate on this pretty hot and heavy, man. So go ahead, do your thing. See what you got.
All right. So thank you, Tony. Nice presentation. So let me go ahead with mine. Okay, so can you see it?
Yes. I can see it.
All right. So here's the point. We're going to be looking at whether accepting that common descent with modification by random mutation and natural selection can explain the origin of species. Makes actually real beneficial predictions to our daily lives. I have to say, I expected Tony to put a little bit more on the table about that, but maybe he's hiding some cards up his sleeve. So let me first give a little bit of an introduction of my background. So I'm an electronics and communications engineer. So I'm fascinated that he's given these examples about genetic algorithms which fall within my educational background. So I also took my master's courses in computer science and engineering. I did my master's in business administration, focusing on international business. I also did 4 years of studies for Islamic studies. I have 30 years of experience in information systems design and implementation, so I work with information all the time, 20 years of which I have been and still am an executive in transnational corporations focusing on information design and implementing of complex systems. I speak 4 languages. One of them is beginner level. I traveled to 28 countries, had many interactions with many peoples of this world. I like conversations. I believe that proclaiming truth is an obligation. I also run my YouTube channel, which has like 27,000 plus subscribers at this time. So those 2 videos I put out, the first one on the left, which speaks about how evolutionary reasoning works, was where we had this discussion, myself and Tony, and we had the discussion about whether this theory is true. And what he said is, well, theories are for making predictions, and if it makes good predictions, he's content about it. And then I put out the other one on the right, which says there are no beneficial predictions for this theory. So let's see about that. First, if we're looking at if this theory is true, then we need to look at what is true, what is truth in philosophical aspects. So people would generally go 3 ways there. I am one of those guys who think that truth is what corresponds to reality and what is coherent. So my primary question is whether the theory of evolution as an explanation is true, which means that the mechanisms that it claims that are driving life from one life form to another life form are actually what happens. And this specific mechanism is explaining that all creatures have common descent, they have common ancestors. It goes back to this one single common ancestor called Luca, which is a hypothetical creature. It has never been observed. And that modification is run by random mutations that are filtered through natural selection. My position on that is that this statement is false, and this explanation altogether, common descent with modification, specifically by natural mutation and random mutation and natural selection, is false. I mean by that it cannot lead to the explanation, a proper explanation to what we see around us, which is diversity and similarity of life forms. However, the third school, which is more pragmatic people, and in terms of pragmatism, you might as well accept something to be true if it is beneficial. And I think this is what we're discussing today. Is this belief beneficial? So every day we can find new real-life applications. So a good part of Tony's presentation was about, strata and this and that, which are essentially observations about whether the theory represents reality, which is not what we're going to be discussing today. This was, for example, the subject of the topic that we had last week, but which is a completely different topic. So let's look at the pragmatic side. First, what's real? If you want to say that this theory is pragmatic, it produces real benefits, then we'd rather be very sure that those benefits are not essentially the outcome of other things. I mean, if we completely obliterate and delete this theory from the face of the earth and consider that we have never put out this theory, can we actually reach the same results by other established disciplines of science? So these disciplines on the right are examples for these disciplines that I would claim that each and every beneficial prediction or innovation or, I don't know, thing that is predicted by this theory that can be used to treat people or to produce better food or medicine or whatever is actually not a result of this belief, but rather, for example, of molecular biology, genetics, understanding of inheritance, understanding of epigenetics, of genetic drift, techniques of breeding, the good work that are done by a very good series of scientists in taxonomy and phylogeny, some of whom Tony has already mentioned, by understanding how natural and artificial selection work, by understanding adaptive responses of living creatures, and by even understanding that there are deleterious mutations. I'm claiming that the theory of evolution is hijacking those achievements by broadening its spectrum to an extent that under modern synthesis, under neo-Darwinism, the theory has, there is an excessive use of this word over evolution, and extrapolations are made to the extent that things that are totally not related to the aspect of random mutation being filtered by natural selection is being attributed falsely to the theory. Why do I reject that the theory is rooted in realism? Since Tony made some remarks about that, I'm going to go very fast here, because this theory claims to explain the origin of species. That's what it's all about. And it says that this is a result of random mutations and natural selection. And it's been 150 years since Darwin put together his theory. He didn't know about genetics, but we know about genetics now. We know also about epigenetics and about so many other things. We have computers, we have models, and we have so many things. So I'm putting here 12 aspects, 12 things that we should expect if this theory is true, and what we actually find. And I find that all of these 12 are not true. So this theory is not rooted in realism. But since this is not the topic of this discussion, I'll skip fast through this and then go to what is typically claimed to be beneficial predictions of this theory. So, for example, since mutations are running the show and we have common descent, we should expect to find all the major transitions of life explainable through this random mutation natural selection thing. However, we do not have explanations from the theory for how LUCA is there, what is the path taken from protocells to LUCA, which is not abiogenesis, because abiogenesis, there is a gray line there where abiogenesis actually stops. But if we consider a protocell living, so why do we have a single common ancestor? How did life move from prokaryotes to eukaryotes? And we had a discussion about endosymbiosis last week, and I'm still having another one, maybe focused on that. This is not explained by mutations. How did eukaryotes become multicellular? How did sexual reproduction come into the stage? How did the different types of mammals, placenta, for example, ones, come into existence? Is all of this explained by random mutation and natural selection? There are no plausible explanations for this. We expect, number two, we expect to see a smooth gradient of evolution without any surprises. And maybe soon enough, maybe with Jackson, we'll be talking about Cambrian explosion, but it's not the only event where there are sudden sprints or spurts. And this is not consistent with an expectation of a smooth gradient, because mutations are random events, and random events don't run crazy suddenly. And even if it's like 25 million years or 30 million years of the Cambrian explosion, it is nothing compared to 4 billion years of life. I don't believe in young Earth, by the way. I don't necessarily believe in young Earth. Whatever science says is the age of Earth I'm fine with. So 30 million years is nothing. And this kind of jumps, quantum leaps, is not what we expect if random mutations is running the show. We should, number three, expect innumerable transitions. And we don't find those innumerable transitions. The ancestor lineages of extant creatures are essentially blank. And you only have categories of creatures, but we cannot trace those categories through specific fossils. We have a very, very sparse lineage. We also expect to find that the genetic mechanisms that run DNA are, very forgiving about mutations, but they're not. We have very sophisticated error correction mechanisms. So if mutation was driving life, why does life try to correct mutations all the time? Doesn't make sense. We also, number 4, but it's actually number 5. We expect that mutations would operate when they happen, but we even see mechanisms in genetics that would mute mutations when they occur. So it says something about how life looks at mutations when they're occurring randomly. It doesn't like it. we expect that there are abundant examples of beneficial mutations because you have very simple organisms that grow into very sophisticated organisms. So beneficial mutations should be abundant. But we have very, very few examples that are proven to have been beneficial mutations, which is quite surprising. We expect that since randomness is driving the show, that there is abundance of what some people like to call junk DNA, or DNA that doesn't do anything. However, when we look at very simple organisms like prokaryotes, simple comparing to others, we find that what we call junk DNA is not that much. And in human beings, it was claimed that like 98% is junk, but the more we look, the more we find that it's not. So I'm wondering how random mechanism would generate that much meaningful code. Doesn't make sense. We should expect that non-coding DNA stays non-coding and does nothing, but every day we find that non-coding DNA is not really non-coding. We expect that efficiency should not be pronounced. Living things should not be efficient, but the efficiency that we see in living things is actually amazing. The energy conversion cycles, etc., we learn from nature, how we learn from the efficiency of nature. So it is very intriguing. When we reach up to the human being, we find another spurt. Language, intellect, and free will cannot be explained by random mutations. I'm wondering if random mutations is running the show. Why would we even accept anything that our mind tells us if it is a product of randomness? Maybe we are all not thinking straight, right? So these are 12 predictions rooted in realism, not in pragmatism, that we should expect that this theory resolves through random mutation and natural selection, that I find it doesn't. So engineers like me look at things that work. If this thing is true, it should work. And engineering is about the science of an art of serving humanity. And in engineering, for example, still, if something is not rooted in realism, like Newton's theory of gravity, for example, so the guy said there is a force. And then Einstein said, no, it's not a force, it's bending of space-time. But Newton's theory took us to the moon, and Newtonian mechanics just work. So I'm fine to say that Newtonian mechanics, or the theory of Newton, that there is a force, is useful. There are real applications for Newtonian mechanics, or essentially for the theory of gravity by Newton. There is also real applications of Einstein's relativity. We know that Einstein's relativity will not work all the time, so it means that it's not completely real. And some of its stuff is really funny. But we know that it does not work well with quantum mechanics at specific situations, mainly in black holes and things like that. So still, it does very beneficial predictions. Our GPS will not work without it. So it is pragmatic to accept it. But we still know that, is it real or not? Atomic orbits were very beneficial, but we know that an electron, a moving charge, will radiate. And if this was the case, it should collapse into the atom. So we know that it's not very real, but we still made benefits of it. So we accept it. So for the theory of evolution, from the aspect of pragmatism, to be worth anything, it should do the same, like what Newton's theory of gravity did, like Einstein's general relativity or relativity in general, like the atomic model. It should give predictions that are not otherwise predicted by other established science. So if general relativity provided no better predictions than Newtonian idea about gravity, we wouldn't have cared about it, right or not? But since it does, since there are applications, real life applications that general relativity and quantum mechanics offer us, we accept them and we work with them. So what are those real life applications? Because if there are no real life applications, then we should categorize this theory where it should sit. It is a theory of philosophy. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophical view of life, that life is driven by randomness rather than by intent, which is my idea about what the theory is about anyway. So I will go into some of the things that I have gone through hundreds. I lost count of discussions over my channel and over my Facebook page about this thing. And people would, bring up vaccines. Vaccines are an application of this theory. Vaccines are not an application of this theory. People have developed vaccines, would have developed vaccines with or without this theory. I'm happy to discuss that. Things like chickenpox vaccine, things like tuberculosis vaccine. Many vaccines and many things that are attributed to this theory have been essentially uncovered to be a result of loss of function rather than a beneficial mutation that develops something innovative. And what the theory is about is a continuous infusion of new information in the genome of living creatures. So if the theory is going to regress into saying that some of these peculiar statements that less is more, okay, loss of function is giving benefit to some creatures under some circumstances. So then we should find a reverse information gradient, because if you are losing functions all the time and losing information all the time to gain benefits in specific circumstances, it means that information was at a peak in the beginning and it's going down all the time. It means that humans are diseased prokaryotes that has lost information. This is not what we see.
Right, just to let you know, you got to start wrapping it up a little bit, because I don't want this to be like all you, because you already doubled his time already. So,
oops. Okay.
Yeah.
So the last slide is actually about hijacking taxonomy. So when things look alike, it doesn't mean that they are coming from a common ancestor. We can essentially build taxonomic charts or classifications for cars as much as we can build for living creatures. It doesn't mean that cars are coming from the same common ancestor. And many cases, even actually, I expected that Tony would mention Carrie Hardig. So it is not. This is a case of homoplasy, not of homology. You're treating one pathogen with a medicine that is useful for another pathogen, because both pathogens share biochemical features. They do not need to be coming from a common ancestor. They are just taxonomically related, which does not necessarily mean that they're coming from the same common ancestor. Life, as we know it, is based on purpose and design for what we build. And when we look at a car and we look under the hood and we find a piece in the car, we know that it's there for a purpose, and then we try to know why it is there. If you have your car broke in the middle of the road, you know that nothing there is by chance, and this makes you inquire. But if you believe in randomness, I would say that there will not be. I would be very surprised if Tony can put on the table an application where somebody said, okay, randomness will happen, and hence this is my invention or this is my application. I would say that essentially the effect of this theory on humanity is causing a state of mental laziness, because whatever we do not understand, we say that it's there randomly, or it's vestigial, or that it is of no function, and it is a remnant of something else. And the more we learn, the more we know that this is not the case. Right. So I would be very, really glad to listen to real life applications from Tony, and we see where we can go from there.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's do this. Tony, I'm going to let you kind of take over from here to ask the kind of questions you want to do, and dive into any of the massive amount of things that he laid out there, because it was a little overbearing, the amount of directions that could possibly go. And maybe Jackson can kind of guide that a little bit too. So go ahead, Tony. I'm going to turn this over to you, Tony, because you got some plenty of time. So you direct it in the way that you want to go, as far as attacking his argument or giving more evidence for yours. Sound good?
All right. Sounds great.
Do it.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for the presentation there, Finding Truth. Sorry. May I call you Ahmed? I mean, I know you. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
All right, cool.
So for audience, my name is Ahmed, by the way. So
Ahmed. Sorry, I meant to pronounce it correctly. I said Ahmed.
yeah, I know the H is difficult, but Ahmed is okay.
Yeah, I have I have a family that's half Jewish, so that particular sound is familiar to my vernacular. I just in America, people tend to drop H's a lot, so I know what you're talking about. I do want to start off with this. Your presentation, very thorough, very very detailed. Completely missed the point. You're asking for what truth is. You're asking for whether we can explain stuff. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about real world applications. We're talking about predictions. Your refutation of Callie Hardig, whether evolution is true or not. I'll grant you, even for the sake of argument, I've even told you in our personal arguments, for the sake of argument, I'll grant you that evolution is 100% wrong. And I'll grant you that creationism is 100% correct. And yet still, whether evolution is true or not, whether it explains everything, the situation with Callie Hardig was in fact predicted by people using evolutionary theory. Now, maybe they were wrong. Maybe you could have used another method, but you didn't until after it was already fixed. I didn't have to talk about sexual reproduction. I can go over that if you like. I can build up some, I can actually find some predictions about that, but whether it explains it or not, that's not really relevant to this conversation. I'd be glad, if you want me to, though, I'll be glad to show you a prediction or two there. Same thing with beneficial mutations and even junk DNA. But I do have a question. Why would you expect non-coding DNA to stay non-coding? What in evolution leads you to believe that?
Let me first comment on Callie's case, because you mentioned it again now. And let's say this.
Actually, can you answer the question? Yeah, we can go back to that, but can you answer his question first?
About the non-coding DNA?
No, about why you would expect non-coding DNA to stay non-coding. Why would you expect it to never be codable again?
I'm sure if I said such kind of a statement, or maybe I do not understand your question.
What you said is if evolution were true, we would expect non-coding DNA to stay that way. I believe those are your words, like almost verbatim.
Okay, so what I said, actually I can refer to the presentation easier. What I said that if evolution is true, then we would find plenty of junk DNA and plenty of non-coding DNA that will remain non-coding. And because there will be the backdrop of the whole scene is randomness. And if randomness produces things that are complete nonsense, that are not used for coding or for anything else, it's okay. But what happens time and time again is that the region of the genome that is seen as doing nothing is getting less and less. And that is doing something is getting more and more. So I think that evolutionary theory or evolutionary proponents or people who accept evolution, specifically by random mutations, accepting this is just an argument from ignorance. Whatever we do not know, we call it not functional or non-coding or whatever other name that we would like to give it, that will essentially imply that it is there because, life is a mess and biochemistry is a mess and mutations are a mess. And the more we know, it shows that this is not the case. So you look at introns and extrons, you look at regions that were thought to be completely rubbish or results of transpositions and duplications, etc. And the more we learn, the more we find out that they are not like that. And there was this ENCODE project that we even mentioned in the last debate. And when scientists there said that the human genome is 80% functional, they were screamed at, and they reduced that to 60%. But when you look to the other belief that it's 1.5% only functional, it's ridiculous. If there are those two estimates, it says to me that the argument of inefficiency, the argument of imperfection, the argument of junkness, the argument of non-codingness, because we were laughing about this S thing before the thing, is an argument from ignorance. It is not something that represents reality. And the more that we keep on believing that these things are there by chance, the more we are not looking seriously into them. And these things, if we look seriously into them, I'm sure that we will find cures for diseases. I'm sure that we will find cures for disorders and for what have you. We're not doing that, or we are doing, but we are pretending that we're not doing, and it's not serving humanity. So what I'm saying is that the belief in evolution is retarding humanity rather than advancing it.
Okay, so here's the thing. If you're saying that evolution predicts that, you're the only person who has ever said that. Nobody I know of has ever said that a non-coding DNA would have to stay non-coding. I've never heard anybody predict that. Maybe you have a citation for that, but I'm also wondering how, if that's the case, does that prevent any of the other predictions from being valid? When people have, whether they're correct or not, whether evolution is correct or not, people are using evolution to predict the outcome of disease, how to treat disease, how to find particular fossils. They're using uniformitarianism to find oil. These are all predictions that require that are based on the scientific principle. Whether it's true or not, I'll grant you all day, even though your representation of junk DNA is, you're actually seeming to kind of argue against junk DNA and argue for genetic entropy. And at the same time, you're contradicting them both. And we can go into that on another debate. But today, the conversation is about beneficial predictions. So I definitely disagree with you that is a prediction of evolution. I've yet to see anybody make it. And even if it was, it's still not part of the subject. The subject is, does evolution make beneficial predictions? I presented a few in my presentation. Can we address those, or do you have another method of going about that? Maybe you have more references to the historical nature of what I presented?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the one beneficial prediction that you mentioned in your presentation is treating people. So you've given this example for Cali, and nothing else in the presentation can be seen as a beneficial prediction in terms of it is serving humanity in a specific way. Some of it might have some epistemic value that you say, okay, this is an explanation. It shows, it gives more evidence to the theory, but these things fall in the realism side, that you find this fossil, this place, so you are able to predict a fossil, you are able to predict a transition form, then maybe your viewpoint is correct. I can say that the evolutionary model, which is driven by random mutations, is not the only model that can predict these fossils. But since we're not discussing this, let's look at serving humanity. So if we're looking at serving humanity and you have a patient, and this patient has that pathogen, like the example of Cali, and somebody says, we do not have a treatment for this pathogen. So what should we do? Let's look at the phylogenetic tree, or a tree of pathogens or of microorganisms that relates microorganisms versus their biochemical features. And we find that other pathogen, I can't remember, the one was Leishmania or something, cannot remember its name, maybe you remember it better.
Leishmania or Fowleria?
Yeah, it's correct. Yeah, so that was the other pathogen. And that one is on the taxonomic tree related to the brain-eating microbe that she had. And somebody says, if this specific chemical or this specific medicine can kill that Leishmania, it can kill the one that she has. What does that have to do with evolution? If you know that my skin type is like your skin type and that this lotion works on me, you can expect it to work on you. It doesn't come as a necessary condition there that both you and me are genealogically related. We're sharing the same grandfather, for example. If my skin and your skin have the same biochemical features for whatsoever reason, then it can help us. If I am black and you are black and this sunblock would work on me, it might work on you. If we have this completely different color, maybe it doesn't. It will not serve that we are ancestrally related or not. It sure does not serve if this ancestral relation is coming from random mutations. So this is the thing. Likewise, I think, for example, Muslim scientists in what is so-called medieval ages have worked on taxonomy. They did classifications of beings. Other scientists have did classifications of beings. If evolution is totally not there, and we do classification of living forms based on a specific property, and then we need to interact with them based on that property being their shape, being their physical properties, being their chemical properties, whatever it is, then this taxonomy will work. If, for example, you know that this is an electric car and the other one is an electric car, then probably you will expect that this one, if it's broken, if you understand that one car, you will be able to fix that other car. It is not a condition there for you to be able to do this, that those two cars are from descending from a predecessor car or precursor car. This is not a requirement. So the question is, again, because you are advocating this, that believing in random mutations and natural selection will make us make innovations and benefit humanity in a way that is not possible if we do not accept it. So what is this real life application that we can have? This is the question. That cannot be predicted by something else.
Okay, here's the thing. Just because when we say something that cannot be predicted by something else, the best we can say is that it hasn't been predicted yet by something else. I mean, for a long time, Lamarckism made predictions, and evolution makes a lot of those Darwinism makes a lot of those same predictions, and that's really the difference. But again, I'm not saying that evolutionary theory is the only way to make predictions that are beneficial. What I'm saying is evolutionary theory does make beneficial predictions. I'll grant you all day that it's wrong. I'll grant you all day that for even that I'm wrong, even though I think it's wrong here, but I'll grant you every day that non-coding DNA should never become coding a DNA ever again. But at the same time, I'm telling you that people have made beneficial predictions, not just with Leishmania. That's just the one I use for the opening. I can go over how other diseases are treated, how the evolution of viruses over time actually make a difference. But here's what I am going to definitely address on your accounting of Callie Hardig, is that no, it wasn't that they were that well related. They're in the same phylum. They're as related as you and I are to alligators. I mean, we're just, well, maybe a little bit closer, but I mean, they're as distantly related as we are in that way. They are the reason why that happened. And I attached the papers in the comments, so hopefully either Jackson or Steve will be able to post those. But it wasn't just a matter of these two are related, therefore we know it's going to work. What Visvesvarga did was actually use that she took a chance and tried that treatment on 3 other microbes that were more closely related to Naegleria fowleri, and found that that actually worked on them. And so therefore she assumed, because of them, that these other the diseases like Leishmania or Leishmaniasis would actually be treatable. That was an evolutionary prediction. You can say she's wrong about evolution all you want, but the fact of the matter is the prediction occurred. And that was the whole point of this discussion, just to show that it's actually made beneficial predictions. This conversation began by me challenging you to show me how creationism can make beneficial predictions, and you told me that that's not the point of it. But that is the point of this debate. So can we get back to that? I mean, do you want to discuss the details of that, or do you need some other time, maybe at another debate, we can discuss the actual details of Cayley-Hardig?
I'm fine discussing the actual detail of Cayley-Hardig, because essentially what happens there is that somebody tried a medicine that works on a similar pathogen, and it worked. It is like you use an antibiotic because you know it works on bacteria, and you hope that that one specific antibiotic you're trying will work also on the bacteria that he has. And what doctors do is that they do plenty of guessing, and they hope it works. So it's not only in the case of Cayley-Hardig that doctors do that. They treat categories of pathogens with categories of medicines. And I can assure you that many of the diseases that we have, or many of the cases that physicians treat, will be based on symptoms, not knowing the exact pathogen that is causing them. And they just hope this one antibiotic or the other one works. And since they do not know which one works, they might as well prescribe 2 or 3 of them, hoping that one of them will catch it. And then if none of them catches it, they will be clueless. Maybe if they are out of them, the patient will die. If he has an antibiotic-resistant bacteria, then hard luck. So I'm not sure what is really remarkable about the Cayley case. It is the way that physicians treat pathogens that they do not know about. They do trial and error. So this was a nice educated guess from somebody who thought that this pathogen looks like the other one. And again, taxonomy is not necessarily a product of evolution. And
that isn't what happened in this case. That isn't what happened in this case. That isn't what happened in this case. They didn't just blindly throw it at Leishmania. I'm telling what Visvesvada did. There's actually 2 papers that I sent, because this wasn't a single step. It wasn't that in 2013 this occurred. This was building up from 2006 to 2007, studying specifically miltefosine, and then attempting it in the next paper on another type of bacteria, and then saying, because of this, we theorize that it will also be effective on Leishmania. So what you described, I agree, that happens all day long. That is not what happened in this particular situation.
So I've actually also read an article about Cayley's case specifically. I'm looking for it too. And there was that statement there that I can't remember if it was one of her physicians or what that has made the statement, that exactly why that specific medicine worked on her case is unknown. So I guess when you have a powerful theory and you make a prediction, you might as well, or you'd rather know why the prediction will or will not work. When something is guesswork, this is not what we call a powerful theory. And once again, taxonomic and phylogenetic trees change all the time. And they change based on different criteria. At a point of time, they were based on morphology. Later, they are based on genetics, and with systematics, etc. They are getting refined. And even when they are based on genetics, it depends on which part of the genetics that you're using. And so what I'm hitting at here is that if it's guesswork, it is not really a theory that makes predictions. It is as good a guess as the physician guess is. And then if this has been, let's say that this has been a good guess or a good stroke of luck for that specific physician treating that specific case, is the theory of evolution, with all the, I don't know, billions or, I don't know, hundreds of billions of whatever currency have been spent on it over the last 100-something years, is it there to treat Cayley-Hardig or to give, benefits, real benefits that every human being can feel. So my question is, what are those genetic benefits? What are those innovations that we can see in our daily lives that have been really harnessed and harvested because we have the theory of evolution?
That's a great question. But the subject of this was, does evolution make beneficial predictions? I pointed out specifically that one. I pointed out other ones, especially in that opening. I pointed out how it's used in conjunction with uniformitarianism to predict where to find not just fossils, but entire former ecosystems, and by that making it possible to find things like oil. It makes all of that comes from common descent, whether it's from mutation and natural selection, whether it's from magic. It doesn't make a difference. That said, I mean, I keep saying this. I'll grant you that we don't have a complete theory, and we probably never will. I'll grant you that the theory is incomplete. I'll grant you that it has holes in it all day long. The subject was, does it make beneficial predictions? I have shown beneficial predictions in my presentation. All you've done is try to deny that it was actually evolution that was used to predict it. I'll grant, like I said, all you're concerned with is evolution true. And, I don't know for sure, but I can use it reliably.
Can I share with you one of the articles about her case? So since you really like to go through her case, so this is an article about her case.
Do you have anything peer-reviewed by any chance? Because I presented 2 peer-reviewed articles.
I don't want to get too. Hang on, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this particular case,
this article just narrates what were the medical procedures, because you're insisting to look at that. So it says here that Callie was treated with antibiotics and antifungals, and a catheter was placed in her brain to reduce swelling. Her condition worsened. So it doesn't look like very good predictions were made there, right? It was like guesswork, and she had to be intubated. At that point, critical care, Dr. Gerald W. Green lowered her body temperature to 34 degrees to further reduce swelling with OK of the CDC. And gave Callie an anti-parasite drug, miltefosine, a German drug not approved for use in the US by the Federal Drug Administration. So that was a real great prediction. So I'm not sure why that was the case. Anyway, so it was developed to treat breast cancer, but has been found to be effective against waterborne parasite that causes, this is the leishmaniasis. And it says here, why Callie has survived is unknown. With a single case, it's hard to draw much of a conclusion. We don't know if she had as much exposure as other people, and it goes on. So. And then it mentions here the Naegleria, etc. So,
nothing you've said has refuted my point here. Essentially, I mean, what you've done is you've taken a truncated version, and I don't know. Have you ever been interviewed by the press? Has anybody in the news or any kind of newspaper ever interviewed you?
I know that the press sometimes distorts what is said.
They don't even mean to. And they also need to cut it out. They need to cut it down to make it more digestible. So what I'm getting at is I presented the actual work of Visvesvara, who's actually the person who hypothesized that miltefosine would work. And they don't know why it works because leishmaniasis does not affect the body the way with the way Naegleria does. It doesn't affect the brain like that. That was a separate thing. So no, they don't know exactly the physical cause of it, but the only indicator they had that it might work was the fact that the theory was that they were related. That was it. That is where the theory came in. The theory of common descent saved her life, even if it was a mistake, even if the theory is wrong. That prediction came from the theory of common descent and was then administered.
All right, let's ask this real quick, and then I want to get Jackson in here real quick because you guys are really getting in the weeds of this particular topic. So let me just kind of cut it off there and say, finding truth. What theory would you have used to determine that the miltefosine would work on this particular type of amoeba, if not for some kind of understanding of phylogeny and common descent? What theory would you have used instead?
I would have used an already existing taxonomy, and it depends on what I am trying to treat. If that taxonomy is, for example, do you think that antibiotics, whatever that kind of medicine is, it is known exactly that each specific bacteria is that specific antibiotic is effective against it or not? No. The process that was used for that case is more or less the process that is used to treat different patients. Physicians use drugs that are biochemically effective against categories of parasites. This is what they do, or pathogens. So the medical science, when Fleming put antibiotics on the table, it was not because he was studying evolutionary biology. It was because he found that penicillin has this biochemical effect on staph. This is how it worked. And then he found that it has biochemical effect on other kinds of bacteria. And then the bacteria adapted to penicillin. And then methicillin came into place, and then vancomycin, etc. And you would hope that methicillin would treat other kinds of bacteria. You don't know. You just know that they are bacteria. It might work, it might not work. This is how medicine works. And bacteria adapt not because they evolve. It is because they are sharing genetics, and they're giving themselves those wild cards all the time. There's horizontal gene transfer. And this is because they have it in their genes already. It is not driven by random mutations. And this is why when a new drug comes into the market, it becomes ineffective in a few years. And this is why antibiotics now are under so much scrutiny for overuse. Because the more we use it, the more the bacteria will get its wild cards up its sleeve, and it will share it. And the ones that do not have it will die out, and the other ones will spread. And this is why antibiotic resistance is all over the place. It is not because of evolution. It is because we did not understand the great engineering that is there in the bacterial genome. And the way that this thing reacts to all attempts to kill it says that there is great ingenuity and great information there. And then we later find that this antibiotic resistance is there in bacteria found in very deep strata that are way before our discovery of antibiotics. And this is why medicine treating parasites and pathogens like this is just guesswork. So the question now is, if this is a theory that makes beneficial predictions, how come we still cannot treat very simple things? We've talked, well, many people think that viruses are not living things anyway. But even with viruses, we have flu has been there around for like 100 years. We cannot treat it. We have this and that. We cannot treat the very simple bacteria, even the one that Fleming has created penicillin to treat. Now the ones that MRSA we cannot treat, which has just expressed genes against penicillin and then against methicillin, etc. And now we cannot treat it, and we're just, very afraid of what can happen tomorrow. So what is in operation here is understanding of biochemistry and of genetics. If there is to be a useful science to treat pathogens, whether they are bacteria or viruses, it will be understanding of genetics, of epigenetics, horizontal gene transfer, and of biochemistry. Nothing else. Evolution has no role there. This is what I'm saying. These are the real powerful scientific disciplines that can treat.
All right, let's let Jackson go ahead, because I want Tony to respond to that. And Ahmed, so hang on one sec. Go ahead, Jackson.
So Ahmed, you are aware that antibiotic resistance can occur even in the absence of horizontal gene transfer?
I'm sorry?
You are aware that antibiotic resistance can develop even in the absence of horizontal gene transfer?
Yes, it can occur because of loss of function. All
Not
right?
necessarily.
And again,
not necessarily. Antibiotic resistance can also occur because if the bacteria can or they mutate, and then this changes whatever protein the antibiotic interacts with, and so it no longer interacts. Not necessarily because they lost it, but because where it interacts has changed.
Great. So when you are
That's
when you're
evolution.
looking at no. Now, okay.
Yes.
If we say that, if you want to say that this is evolution, I am happy to say that it's evolution. If you want to use the word, I'm not happy because it creates a kind of equivocation. So now, it goes back to what I was saying in my presentation. If we call this evolution, if we say that bacteria losing proteins or losing markers on its cell membrane, or losing that specific organelle that was targeted by a specific biochemical that we call an antibiotic, it's losing this function or losing this
They don't necessarily
protein
lose
marker.
it. They don't necessarily lose it. It's not always
Lose it,
necessarily
stop
about losing.
expressing it, change the mechanism
I didn't
that they
say
are
they
using.
stop expressing it.
Okay, tell me
Okay.
what you're saying, and I'll respond to it.
Okay, it's not always about loss. Changing something, changing a protein does not necessarily mean you lose some part of it. It's a protein. You are just changing the way it folds or the way it interacts with something else. That does not necessarily mean loss is happening, right?
Great. So
Okay.
once again, we had the discussion before about it was last week, and we had also some discussion in the after show about the E. coli experiment and about
Yes,
other things.
nothing was lost in that example.
Absolutely,
right? Nothing was lost.
But what happened in that example is that E. coli knows what it's doing. It changed its genome to be able to metabolize citrate. So again,
I don't know what you mean.
Where
no.
does random mutation come into operation? So I will tell you
that there was a duplication.
Guys, we're way off topic here, and
yeah, way off.
I really want to get Tony to respond to the initial thing that I'm going to say.
I do have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you're right. I have one question, and then I'll toss it over to Tony.
Okay.
Sure.
My question is, since this is a debate about beneficial predictions, and Tony provided both examples in medicine as well as in paleontology, and none of the examples in paleontology have been touched. You kind of seem to agree that those happen, but that because they're not beneficial, they're not relevant, but they are a big part of evolution. The fact that you do recognize that evolution is being used to predict fossils too, right? Because that was also part of his introduction, of Tony's introduction.
Okay, so predicting fossils is not what I would call something beneficial to humanity. Okay, because we're looking at real life applications. So if you can predict the existence of a tiktaalik or of this and that, or of a flying dinosaur with fingers or whatever that is, this is not what we are calling predictive power of a theory in terms of being pragmatically rooted in truth. If we are going to accept something in terms of pragmatism, like general relativity or like Newtonian theory of gravity or whatever, we are not accepting it just because we like the idea of space-time being bending. We like it because we are able to make our GPS working. So my question is, let's say that I will look the other side. I will not care if this theory is really explaining how we are related to how we came from Luca or Lika or whatever. Okay, Lika being the last eukaryotic common ancestor. I will look the other side. I will not care if it says that humans are descended from a common ancestor with apes, okay, or human are great apes. I will not care. But maybe you can tell me, if you take this belief, then, for example, if we try a medicine on gorillas or chimpanzees, it's going to work on humans, but it doesn't. So this is going to be the predictive power that I'm looking for. If you are telling me, please accept common ancestry in the macroevolution sense, because it is going to treat you or going to give you better meat to eat or better crops to eat or whatever, if you accept that random mutation is driving the development of life through the filter of natural selection, it will give you these benefits. Okay, I will accept it because it's pragmatic. I will look the other side from realism. But the problem is, if we have this debate about realism, it doesn't work. And we can take hours on that. If we have the debate about pragmatism, it doesn't work. So why would I accept the theory? This is the trick. I know that Newtonian mechanics, the Newtonian theory of gravity is false, because general relativity proves it's false. But I'm using it because it's pragmatic. I do not need to use general relativity to launch a rocket outside the Earth's gravity. I just need to use
It
Newtonian
just kind of
mechanics. I will
sounds like
accept
you're
it.
rejecting it either way.
I'm sorry?
It just kind of sounds like you're rejecting evolution either way. Like, if it does make predictions in some capacity, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't make predictions in this capacity, it still doesn't matter. That's kind of sounds what you're saying.
If it does make predictions, then an evolutionary model, then I can put an evolutionary model on my computer to create a medicine. I will be glad to do that. But it doesn't. If you put on your computer, if you create a model on your computer, you cannot create a new medicine with it. You do not, it doesn't exist. If there is one medicine that has been created by running an evolutionary program or an evolutionary calculation model, and it gets out with a new molecule because it has assumed that something will randomly mutate, show me. There isn't something
So
like that I know about.
So your standard of evidence is only if someone makes a computer model of antibiotic resistance, for instance, and runs that, and we get a new antibiotic from that, then you'll accept evolution.
I have actually said many examples, like tell me, for example, that if you accept that you are having a shared common ancestor with a chimpanzee, then whatever medicine that works on the chimpanzee will work on you. It doesn't.
Well, that's not necessarily the case.
If
But hang on,
That's not exactly true. That's not
hang
exactly
on.
true.
Hang on, I want to get Tony back in here because again we're just going way into the weeds
Yeah,
here.
go ahead.
Tony, Finding Truth has said a lot of things. I would like you to address certain things that he has said because there's some issues there.
Well, I mean, I'm getting in my old age, so I've forgotten a couple of things he said. By now.
How about
But,
how about this? Basically, start from the position of you are arguing that evolution makes beneficial predictions. You had in your initial presentation, you had shown those beneficial predictions, including the usages of certain drugs that will work on certain other organisms because of we assume common descent. They're going to have relationships with each other, right?
Yes.
Okay. Go back to that a little bit because I'm not understanding Finding Truth's argument counter to that. And I'm trying to be charitable here, but I'm not seeing any counter to that argument. So maybe talk about that particular thing from your presentation again.
Do you want me to cite the details in the paper? Or
No, you don't have to go that far. But I mean, you're making the argument that because things are similar because of common ancestry, that we can make testable predictions, which seems to be the case, right?
Yes.
So maybe you can try to suss out what Finding Truth is trying to argue against that, because I'm not seeing his argument, to be honest with you.
I don't think it's fair for me to sit here and tell you what Finding Truth's arguments are.
Fair.
I'm sorry. I mean, I have too much respect for the guy. He's a relatively intelligent guy. I disagree with him here. I'm obviously with his engineering, especially system and information technology. I really expected him to jump on some of my other stuff, but he sort of kept it sort of limited here. But I did want to ask about pragmatism. You were talking about it. That's fine.
I'm happy to jump on the genetic algorithms if you'd like. I'm happy to do that.
As long as we're talking about beneficial predictions, that's fine.
Yeah.
Now, that said, when you're talking about pragmatic, if we can use the theory to predict reality, how is that not pragmatic?
Because we can't.
We did, we have, and we do.
Give me an example. So I'll tell you why we can't.
Okay.
So,
like I gave the example of knowing exactly where to look to find what eventually was branded as Tiktaalik. Knowing that it was there, even though nobody had looked for it or had any idea where it was. There are thousands of fossils that I have covered in my entire series. I have a sub-series about transitional fossils. Not all of them were discovered by using evolutionary predictions, but quite a few of them were. We can do that all the time. So that's one thing. We can predict reality, even if it's a minuscule reality. How is that not pragmatic?
Okay, so pragmatic is about predicting things that are beneficial in practice. So
Where
if somebody
did
puts
that
out
come from? It says the definition of pragmatic is dealing with things sensibly and realistically in a way that's based on practical rather than theoretical considerations. Now, before the theory is tested, it is just theoretical. But once that theory makes a prediction and that prediction is confirmed, we're no longer talking about theoretical considerations. We are now talking about practical considerations. Therefore, pragmatic.
Well, no, that's why we titled the conversation, if the theory makes beneficial predictions.
Right, but you just said pragmatic, not beneficial. Pragmatic has nothing to do with beneficial. I'm using your language.
Fine. When I'm talking pragmatic here, I am talking pragmatic in terms of finding things that are practically good for us. So if you can define pragmatic in different ways. If you want to say it is pragmatic in terms of, in practice, we will go and predict the existence of a fossil, and then we will find a fossil, or we will predict the existence of an insect, like Darwin did for the moth that has the long tongue, etc. And we call that pragmatic. I can make the same predictions using creationism or using other evolutionary models that are not driven by mutations and natural selection, and we can actually do a complete debate about that.
Well, could you just do it with creationism then? I mean, because that's the only interest I have, is which one can we actually do stuff with? I can do stuff with evolution. I can do stuff with the Big Bang. I can do stuff with abiogenesis. I can do stuff with uniformitarianism. What I can't do is anything with creationism other than talk about it.
Okay, so the topic of the debate is not creationism, but I'm happy to take this, side turn. Okay, so let's look at that. So somebody goes to Darwin and he tells him, we have this flower, it has, its nectar is so deep. Okay, how is that so? So he says, there must be an insect that has a long tongue. Please tell me, how does the belief in common descent with modification by random mutations and natural selection serve you to make this prediction? Would you rather make this prediction?
I just want to point out,
by looking at life, by looking at life as designed to be functional. So if there is this kind of plant, then there must be a corresponding kind of creature. It might be, I don't know, a sparrow or an insect or whatever, that will serve its pollination, its cross-pollination. You will reach that conclusion if you look at life as having symbiotic relationships and being an integrated system. You will immediately reach this conclusion.
How do you assume that? How do you deduce that from a creation event?
yeah, also, I want to point out Darwin was ridiculed by creationists right after he made that prediction because they said God just designed Angræacum orchids that way. They said it was just designed that way. It was Darwin who predicted that based on his coevolutionary model, there must have been a moth to pollinate it. So no, creationism did not predict that. It, in fact, predicted the exact opposite.
Well, I cannot speak for the guys who criticize Darwin for this, but whenever I look at something in nature, and that something needs a complementary function that it does not have, I will know that that complementary function is available in nature one way or the other. And if it is the natural thing in operation, that insects cross-pollinate flowers, then it should be an insect or something like a hummingbird or whatever. This should be a natural consequence of looking at life as an integrated system. Just
But
like when you look at
how
an
do you use creationism to determine
Give
that?
us an example of that, of how to use creationism to determine something like that.
exactly the same way that Darwin used his co-evolution ideology to explain that. He expects that creatures have
But can you
co-evolved.
provide an example?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm giving you the same exact example. If you look at a flower or at...
Okay, but it wasn't predicted by creationists.
It was predicted by a scientist. By the way, Darwin said that God breathed life in the first cell, so he wasn't against creation happening at one point.
That's
Maybe you are. Maybe you are.
Not
Maybe
yeah,
you
that's
are.
not what I asked though.
Well, how about we
That's
try
not-
this? Somebody
Yeah,
would try
maybe.
this. So hang on. Somebody try this. So
Yeah.
Tony had mentioned, Tony, you talked about them finding a very specific fossil at a very specific location. Tiktaalik, I think, was your example, or was it something else?
Yes.
It was Tiktaalik. Okay.
It was Tiktaalik.
Okay, so Tiktaalik. So how? Let's ask Finding of Truth. How would you, if you said, "Hey, we want to go find this fossil"? Tony has explained how Neil Shubin would have done it, and how they would have used the facts that there's common
Steve,
descent.
Steve, can I stop you before you ask
Sure.
that question?
Absolutely.
Because I think I know where you're going to go. You're going to probably ask him, how would you have used creationists
Yes,
to predict where Tiktaalik was? But that's not the correct question.
Okay, go ahead.
How would you use creationism to even believe there would be something
Fair
like
enough.
Tiktaalik there?
Great question.
Okay, so let's look at that. So you have mentioned in your initial discussion or your initial presentation that my position is already that creationism is not there as a scientific theory to make predictions. Okay, so I am not coming to the table with the idea that there is this scientific theory called creationism. Creationism is a backdrop of a belief system. What this belief system provides is that life is not here by chance, and hence it is not driven by random mutations. It is driven by intent and purpose. Now, would I, sitting on this chair now, if you tell me, can you predict that there is a Tiktaalik? Can I predict Tiktaalik by creationism? No. I must have an alternative theory where I would predict how morphologies will appear in certain biological or geographical or weather conditions, or in certain ecosystems. Now, a theory that will be a rival theory to evolution, and I am talking now about evolution in terms of common descent with modification by random mutations and natural selection. So you will be invoking natural selection here, that you would expect to find a Tiktaalik in a place where its traits are going to be selected for. There will be positive selection towards it. Now, the whole premise here, the point of contention here, is how Tiktaalik arrived to the stage de novo. How is there Tiktaalik? The point of contention is, does Tiktaalik occur or happen because random mutations to genome of a precursor creature caused it to occur, and then positive selection fixed it in the environment? Or that Tiktaalik was designed to match that specific place, and then hence it occurred? Now, how it is designed, there will be the more Christian creationism thing, that all creatures have been created in this fixed way, specifically on whatever day of the creation, and they were there all the time, etc. In my religion, I do not have to take this position. In my religion, I know that God designed things. I would be glad if you tell me that, for example, reptilians or amphibians have this common ancestor, and this common ancestor unfolds or expresses its genes over large epochs of time according to changes in the environment. But random mutations is not involved there whatsoever. There is no random thing, whatever, there. And I will give you the parable. Now, I do not have the funds, I do not have my lab, I do not have my team to go and really dig behind this and prove it. But I am telling you that there are rival theories, and that are the basic premises of random mutation, explaining things fails at every critical fork of life. Whether you can predict by understanding geology and geography and ecosystems that this specific creature has the right traits to be existing in that specific place, in that specific strata, I cannot really see the causality there between random mutations driving life or not. This is the point of contention. Randomness is the point of contention. My point of discussion here, coming from a creationism background, is that God does not create through randomness. God creates through intent and design. That's the whole point. So you look at an embryo, you look at a fetus, you see it unfolds. You look at an insect, you find it goes from an egg into a larva, into this, into that, and then you find that the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Great. So we see in operation that the same genome can unfold into very, very different morphologies at a specific program. I don't mind that somebody puts together a theory and says that this is the way reptiles change, because they had the design, they had the information to respond to changes in the ecosystem, to the extent that at one point of time, when the ecosystem is good for dinosaurs, then the morphology is dinosaurs, and later it becomes something else. I don't have a problem with that. But if you tell me that what is driving it is randomness, I have a great problem, because it's not proven, it's unobservable, and it doesn't provide any real predictions.
Okay, did you? I want you to look up a word
The
when you
problem
get a
is
chance.
that the belief in
Hang
randomness.
on, find out truth. Let Tony respond.
Ahmed, when you get a chance, dude, I need you to look up a word for me, and the word is brevity. Can you do that?
What is that?
Brevity. Brevity. You didn't need to take up all of that time. This has been an hour and a half conversation. It should have been over 45 minutes ago. The thing is, what you haven't addressed there is predictions. Now, you're right. Before you started this conversation, you did say creationism cannot be used and is not meant to be used in science to predict anything. But then in the course, the only reason you got off onto that was because in the course of this conversation, you said you could use creationism, and maybe you just said it off the cuff. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands we cannot use creationism to predict anything. And I know you have somebody in the comments who has claimed that somebody has. And if you want to bring her up or read her, I'm talking to Steve or Jackson.
Yeah, we'll get to the questions here soon. I'm trying to keep track of some of them.
We're talking about predictions. If you disagree with a mechanism, fine. I'll agree with you all day. There's a problem with the mechanism. I mean, I don't agree with you, but for the sake of discussion, I will. We are talking about predictions. Now, as far as pragmatic, we can go over that. But I mean, that's essentially my big issue with you is that you haven't talked much about prediction. It's usually the explanation or the mechanism behind it. What we want to know is about predictions. Did evolution make predictions? Yes. Were all of them confirmed? No. That's how it grows. But the ones that it does, I mean, it does make predictions that do benefit us, that we do use, that do benefit you. Again, as I said, if you use a car, you're benefiting from the use of both uniformitarianism and common descent put together to find oil. That's how, I mean, as well as plate tectonics. These theories do work. They make predictions. Creationism does not. And that's where this ends as far as the conversation goes, because everything else has just been repetitive.
All right, finding for truth. We'll try brevity here. Well, hang on. Because, hang on. Tony's right. We need a little brevity here. So very simply, hang on. Yeah, hey, finding for truth. Hang on. Does creationism have predictability? Your version of creationism, does it have predictability?
This is a question for me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you ask me, does creationism have predictability? Yes, it has predictability in terms of putting your mindset on a way where when you look at something in a living thing, for example, you will understand that it has a function, that it is not vestigial, that it's not there by chance, that it is not junk, that it is not leftovers.
That's an explanation. That's not a prediction. Hang on, we're going to go back to the brevity here. That's an explanation. That's not a prediction. Yeah. There's a distinct difference between those two terms.
To frame, making very specific predictions is not the objective of creationism. Creationism is a worldview.
You did say creationism makes predictions. Please give us a prediction.
Yes.
Check the comments. There's somebody there who gave you the answer already. And even in one of my examples, I actually gave you an example, one of them, that if you had been astute, you would have caught an issue with it. And I did it specifically so you'd bring it up and show you how evolution made yet another prediction. You haven't really addressed that. Can you give us a prediction of creationism? We'll talk about that. Can you give us a prediction of creationism as we were asked, or just agree to just that it doesn't have predictability?
No, you cannot look at creationism in terms of providing a specific prediction.
But you said it could.
Yeah, you can look at creationism in terms of making a general prediction that nothing there is there by chance. So if you look, for example, at the example that I said that you can predict that by creationism, which was I talking about the flower, that needs an insect to pollinate it, yes, creationism can tell you that if this flower exists, there needs to be a counterpart to pollinate it. You don't need evolution. You don't need to invoke random mutations and natural selection to do that. You will know that if this flower is there, if this thing is there, it is part of an integrated design, and this integrated design will cater for it. And this is where creationism has to stop. It will then push you to do the right research to find what and where that insect is. But creationism is not a scientific theory. Creationism is a belief system and is a mindset. This is my position on that. So I'm not in an attempt to show you that creationism is a scientific theory, because it's not. Creationism says that there is a creator. A creator is supernatural by definition. It is outside of the axis of
but that's not predictability,
natural.
though. That's, I think, Tony's argument would be.
That's a mindset. That's a mindset. When you are confronted with a question and you are a creationist, what that will make you say is that you will predict that there is an answer. And this answer has to be logical and part of systems. It is not, you will not be able to give an answer that this is there by chance. So this is what I mean. Now, again, if we go back to our topic, you said that there is something that you said that I did not address. What was that?
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. I mean, the what? No, it had nothing to do with the genetics. It had to do with, you know what? We will discuss it. But I mean, I gave that to you. It was a little gift from me, and you didn't bite. So, you know what? Do you really want to open up that can of worms?
Yes, go ahead.
Because, you know, I will be glad to just address that with you. But really, we've already discussed the predictions, and you haven't had I've already made my case, man. You haven't even refuted it.
Well, I think I did, because you made one case of one specific patient.
3 cases. I gave at least 3 predictions.
And I'm telling you that this is the way that medicine happens, and medicine deals with categories of pathogens using categories of drugs. This is what medicine does, with and without the theory.
And that is medicine is done a certain way by doctors who are practicing medicine. I'm talking about the people that are innovating in medicine.
So when you're looking at what is now called evolutionary medicine, if this is what you're referring to, which is a topic I would be glad to address. Number one, you need to take in consideration that this whole aspect of evolutionary medicine is something new. And when you look at its core, you will find that evolutionary medicine will be looking at, for example, what were the ancestors of the human being.
No, you're going off topic again. You're going off topic again. We're talking about the predictions that were actually made by the theory. People use the theory. I've given those. I've already listed 3.
I don't think that Kelly stands for anything. She's just there with a pathogen like all other kinds of pathogens that are treated.
I didn't say she stood for anything. I said her treatment was predicted by the theory. That is all I said. You can say it was a lucky guess, and I'll even give you that. But the fact of the matter is, evolution does make predictions that do come true and are helpful. So that is all I've said. Everything else you've said is superfluous. This conversation should have been 20 minutes long. So to close this point, because at a point we'll need to give that to the audience to take a position on that. So to wrap this up, this case and other cases are a result of the predictive power of taxonomy and phylogeny and systematics. They are not the result of, depending on the case, they are not the result of a belief in random mutations and natural selection. This is the whole point of contention. This is the way that doctors treat people. And if this theory is going to be positioned as a theory that can make you make lucky guesses, then I don't think this is a theory that is to be put in operation. Theories that have predictive power do not make you make lucky guesses. They make you make accurate predictions that are useful to people in operation, in real life.
So we can leave that to be judged by people rather than us.
All right, no, I think that's fine.
I can agree to that.
Yeah, I agree to that as well. Tony, did you want to open that gift? It's up to you. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
because you didn't read. The thing is, you didn't read my other papers. I told you about the Callie Hardig thing, and you had plenty of time to go after the peer-reviewed literature. You didn't go after it. You went directly to a pop article.
Yeah, I noticed
actually
that too.
had to, and I don't know if there's a way to get this to you guys right now, but I have sources for everything I've said. Everything I have said, I have the sources, and they're all peer reviewed with the exception of one, because it's just to explain something.
Can we address that, Tony? About peer review and why we a lot of us, in science and philosophy and these topics, peer review is not the be all end all. Let's get that straight. However, it is a little bit more higher standards than what you find in a pop science thing, because pop science gets shit wrong all the time. That's just the way it is. So when we're having these types of discussions, do you think it's more advantageous to have at least something that has some citational references that you can find in a journal, whether it's 100% true or not, whatever, it's people still a lot of them opinion papers, but they have been vetted by some sort of authority and expert in the fields, rather than going to a pop source? Do you see the difference in that, at least? Finding truth.
Finding truth.
Well,
there's no four.
There's no four. I make shit up as I go along.
Yeah, well, what I have referred to is the statement by the people who have treated the patient. Now, those people were not evolutionary biologists. Now, whether this thing has treated her because there is an evolutionary explanation is something else. I would rather leave Kelly's case there, because, as I say, this is the way doctors treat people all the time.
Okay.
And by the way, Tony, you told me about Kelly before you sent me a quotation. You did not send me the paper, but I had to look for her case. And this is what I found. So if you have the peer-reviewed papers, I think you put them in the comments. I'm glad to have
and I'll put them in the video description
to read the papers, put comments on them, and follow up on that. And I will show you from the papers how random mutation has nothing to do with the whole thing. But
Hey,
I didn't
Steve,
read
would you
them.
like the rest of the sources from the opening?
Yeah, if you send them to me, I'll put them in the video description afterwards. Absolutely. Yeah, I believe in citations, and I me, I have the same issue I have with philosophy. People just throw like a dictionary out. It's not going to work for me. A couple quick questions.
It's interesting that you say that, because actually at the beginning of this, finding truth as opposed to finding for truth.
Sorry, because I'm always going to get them confused with standing for truth, and I don't mean to. You're epic. No, you're epically light years ahead of standing for truth. Let's just get that on the table.
Completely different.
Yeah. So
yeah. But finding truth started this with his credentials, and they're respectable credentials. They impress the hell out of me. On the other hand, I can come to this debate. I don't have the credentials. My degree is a doctorate degree in divinity with a focus on apologetics. It's going to be absolutely useless in this conversation, or pretty much any conversation I want to have for the rest of my life. But what I do have is papers. I don't just cite things off the hip, because I'm always wrong. I have to use the professionals that actually have done stuff. So that's why I use my papers. That's why I make sure that even in my videos, I present the papers. So I want you guys to know that this isn't me talking. I'm just the messenger. This is what the scientific consensus has said. So that's kind of how I want. I don't like to present it as I'm not the one presenting.
No, I get that. No, I get that. And we have a quick super chat. Danish debater, 20 DKK Danish krone. Crowns, I think they're pronounced. Can we have a vote? Tony Wright, type T. Ahmed, type A. We have one vote for you there, Ahmed. So just saying, you got one. You got one. But all right, so
he's got a couple more now.
I can't. I see two. I see 2, 3, 4 now. Okay, so yeah, look, but most of them are T's. But anyways, that's a straw poll. Jackson, you got some questions for both of them? Because I hate to say this, but I think this was kind of over the first 20 minutes. But what that?
Tony, what is the one that you said they wanted me to bite at?
He's not going to tell you.
We'll discuss that another time. As soon as you do that, because you didn't do your homework on Callie Hardig. I'm not going to do your homework for you on this other one.
He's going to make you wait, man. It's just the tension. So So when the release
Other
is there, it should be
creationists have
awesome.
refuted me, and that's the reason why I actually baited you so that you would present that one, and you didn't. So somebody else is going to have to take the bait.
By the way, it wasn't the HC2, was it?
The what?
The human chromosome 2?
No.
Okay.
No.
Can I bring that up real quick and Jackson maybe talk about it for a sec? Would you be okay with that? Or would you rather not? Up to you.
He's
No.
not listening anymore.
No, I'm asking you, Tony. If you don't. If you
Oh,
don't
you're
remember
asking.
it. Yeah.
It's really more
Yeah,
up to your
Tony.
audience.
Well, somebody in the
everyone's
audience
paying
brought it up. That's why.
Oh, yeah, then by all means,
Okay.
please, Jackson. I mean, I'm all ears whenever
Yeah,
Jackson
go ahead,
talks
Jackson.
anyway.
You take this one because I love human chromosome 2.
Oh, well, this was yet another prediction of evolution because when geneticists were doing karyotypes of or chromosomes early on, they realized that we were missing a pair of chromosomes, but that one of our chromosomes, which is chromosome 2, was like exceptionally long, and so they predicted that there should be a fusion event should have occurred between two chromosomes, or between two pairs of chromosomes, sorry. And then they looked for the telomere region as well as the vestigial centromeres, and they found both in human chromosome 2, verifying that prediction.
All right, that's in a nutshell. So how would a couple different questions? How I think Tony said it the best. How would creation even go about to even formulate the question to where we would find those missing chromosomes?
Well, they don't. They just deny it happened at all.
Well, I think they've
All their
actually
papers-
changed something. I think they've actually moved away from that position. But
As
of recently,
everything I've read of like Tompkins is just like, no, it didn't happen. There's no
yeah, I think a lot of
fusion
people
region,
are.
there's no
Yeah, I
vestigial
think some
centromere.
other people are avoiding Tompkins' particular approach on that. But okay, so finding truth.
Well, fair enough.
How, if we wanted to find out why we have a different Dippler number than other members of the great apes, how would we go about doing that, and why? Why would we even expect it to be in creationism that there was some kind of fusion that existed on two chimp?
I like that example. It is not a beneficial prediction by definition in terms of what we are discussing in this dialogue. But since we have put the lid on that, I'm quite happy to entertain it. So let's look at how this prediction was arrived at in the beginning. So you're starting from a standpoint where you are asserting that humans and apes share a common ancestor, and this common ancestor is obviously an ape. And apes have 46 chromosomes, so you have a problem. So how come humans are great apes and they have apes have 48 chromosomes? So how come humans are great apes and they have 46? So then you say, okay, since you are asserting that the ancestor is an ape that has 48, then there has to be a way that 48 goes to 46, and the way is that a pair of chromosomes fuse, or two pairs fuse into the 46. And then people start looking for which one. So how this is, it's not you're starting from a position where you are asserting common ancestry. Now, when you look at the reality of what was found, so you find chromosome 2 and you say that chromosome 2 is the result of fusion of those two chromosomes. And then you say, I expect to find two centromeres. One of them is a real centromere and the other one is a false one. I expect to find telomeric markers in the place of fusion outside of their place. I expect this and that. So when you look at what is there on the ground, you find that what is called centromeres and telomeres, the false ones, do not really have centromere and telomere sequences. They are like 70%.
Oh my goodness.
Wait. Well, I want to make sure I heard you correctly on that one.
Oh my goodness.
Can you say that again, please, for our audience? Because I have to go what when you said that?
Yeah. So the way I remember this, we're discussing this without preparation, right? So the way I remember this is that there are 5 or 6 objections about this being the chromosomal fusion thing has happened. So for the sake of the audience, let me just explain them. So number one, you expect to find those two chromosomes fusing together into this one chromosome, which is chromosome 2 in humans. So you expect that chromosome 2 will have the combined length of both chromosomes. And the way I remember it is that there is 1.3 million base pair difference in the length of those two if you compare them. So I would really wonder, where did the extra base
Well,
pairs come
I don't
from?
know why you would expect them to be the exact same length. Plus, you would have telomeric shortening. But
Yeah.
Because they are the result of fusion. So if they are the result of fusion and the telomeres are in the middle, so the middle telomeres should not endure any shortening because they're not behaving like telomeres. Telomeres get shortened.
That's why they fused, because they didn't
That's
act
why.
as telomeres. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They didn't
Yeah.
act as telomeres. They were degraded.
And telomeres are not in the millions of the base pairs, and the difference is in length. The way I remember it, I'm not prepared for this, but the way I remember it is that the difference in length is like 1.3 million base pairs. So this is a lot. This is not telomere shortening whatsoever. It is. Telomeres are not that long. The second thing is that the telomere fusion site and the false centromeres are not exact telomere and centromere sequences. They are not the exact sequence. I do not remember the sequence, but I remember that if you compare base pair by base pair, these are not exact telomeric and centromeric sequences. I think the way I remember it is that they are 70%.
Well, they're degraded, but they are
similar to what
TTA-GGG. The telomeric repeat is a TTA-GGG. But
Correct.
but they're degraded,
Great.
but we
So
expect
if they are degraded-
Well, hang on. We expect degradation because the telomeres didn't do what they were supposed to do to prevent telomeric fusions because they were degraded. So we would expect there to be
Good.
pristine, a couple of pristine telomeric repeats, but we would also expect degradation of them. Is not? Would we not?
Yeah.
Predictable.
So if you expect degradation due to mutations to them, then you should expect that none of whatever is in the telomeric fusion site and the false centromere is coding for anything. But the way I also remember it is that there are detected genes there. I don't remember if
The
they are in
DDX11-2
the
gene.
false.
Yeah. Called the
There are
DDX11L2.
That is a no.
but it's
so-
non-functional. It's a pseudogene.
Yeah, it's a. So,
So now
there's
we
a
have
right
two
next to
sides of
the.
the.
Okay, but right next,
Yeah.
you do understand, Ahmed, that right next to the telomeric, alleged telomeric fusion site is a telomere-specific gene pseudogene family.
The DDX11.
It's not crossing it. There's an alternative transcript that crosses it, but
Yeah.
that's not
not the
functional for anything.
canonical.
But DDX, but DDX11L2 is a pseudogene, and it's right next. It is a pseudogene, or sorry, a telomere-specific pseudogene family,
Mhm.
and it's right next to the purported telomere region. How do you
Exactly.
explain that?
So now you start having two sides of the story. If this the way I remember it was in the telomeric region, not just beside it. So this is the way I remember it. I need to get back to the papers. But if you say that this is a telomere that is now different than the original telomere fusion site due to degradation, then you shouldn't find any genes there. Not pseudogenes, not genes, not functional genes, not
No,
dysfunctional genes.
Why?
That's not the case.
Because how long is this gene? If it's a gene and you find this gene the way it should be, and you invoke randomness to create this gene, I find this quite remote.
Tony,
This
do you
is
want to
the
touch? Do you want to touch on this particular topic, Tony? Because this is.
Genetics
So,
isn't really my specialty. So,
let me just-
Okay.
and it's not
It's
really on
okay.
topic anyway.
No, it's really not, and I agree. It was just it's one of those things about predictability, right? If you're talking about beneficial predictions, evolution would predict we would have to find some causation why we're two chromosomes different from any other member of the great ape family, and we find it. Not only did we find it, we found exactly where it was located. We found that what you call the false centromere, which is the pseudo centromere or the inactive centromere. We found it. It does have the telomeric repeats. It does have the DDX11 pseudogene, which is a family of genes that we find on other telomeres that exist. Clearly, that's a fingerprint. It is a telomeric fusion. Nobody, I think, argues against that except for maybe Tompkins, but even he, I think, he argues as a functional gene there, and as Jackson pointed out, there's no transcript from that particular gene.
I would like to put something else on the table really here that I don't hear in this conversation that much. Let's say that humans had 48 chromosomes and they didn't have 46 chromosomes altogether. What should we expect? We know that we look like apes. It's a no-brainer, right? We do look like apes. So what do you expect when you look at our genetics? you expect when you look at two creatures that have the same morphology that they would have similarity. They will have similarity in their genetics, because this
Tony covered that in his opening.
yeah. So
Tony covered this exact talking point in his opening.
Yeah, I heard the part about the duck-billed platypus and the duck, etc. But the duck-billed platypus and the duck, the matter of the beak, I'm not sure if this is what you're talking about. But the beak of the duck-billed platypus is fleshy. It's not keratin. So I don't accept the argument. But let's go back to the humans and the chimpanzees, or the humans and the great apes in general. So the fact is, humans look like apes, and humans look like apes. You expect that there is quite a bit of similarity. We're not looking at a beak that is keratin and a beak that is fleshy. We are looking that humans do look like apes. So if we had 48 chromosomes, you will expect that those 48 chromosomes, they will have plenty of similarity. Now we know that the proteins, however, the expression of those chromosomes in humans, regardless if they are classified as great apes or not, and in chimpanzees and gorillas, the expression is quite different. Obviously, we don't have the same texture of skin. We don't have the same in many things. Protein, there are plenty of protein differences between humans and chimpanzees, and I do not want to quote the figure, but if I go back to literature, the differences in the protein expression of the DNA of both creatures is quite significant. However, we do expect that the DNA would be the same. So now I'll put a different thing on the table there. That the fact that we have 48 chromosomes on both sides, whether two of them are fused or not, and they have synteny, is not really surprising, because the morphology looks like each other. Now, if there are exceptions in the living things, that things have apparent similarity in morphology, but differences in genes, but very clear difference in the genetics, it is because what we see as apparent is superficial, because the beak of the duck-billed platypus and the beak of the duck are not really the same thing. They are completely different. One is keratin and one is fleshy. So you expect that the genes have to be different, but the lips and the eyes and the fingers and the organs of the human and the chimpanzee are the same. So you expect similar genetics, but you expect that the different kind of skin that we have will have different protein expressions between humans and chimpanzees. So the message here is that I'm putting on the table, where is the rocket science? You have 48 chromosomes that create this morphology and 48 chromosomes that create that morphology. And my point of view, there is a fingerprint here, because every great ape has 48 chromosomes. Even I think most of the other apes, the lesser apes, they also have 48 chromosomes.
They vary all the way from 40 to 42, 44.
So the ones that are claimed to be our category, that we share common ancestor with, have 48. So why would a human being have 46? I think this is a kind of fingerprint, because my belief system is that humans are a separate creation. If I say that other things might be an unfolding of different spawning events or completely separate creations, specifically in the human being is a separate creation in my belief system. And in my belief system, God wants to be found. He does not want to obscure himself. He says, if you want to find me, look here and there.
Okay,
one of the places.
Hang on, you're kind of sermonizing a little bit at this point, real quick.
Yeah.
I think hang on. I think what would be to wrap that up real quick, because you're going long, and brevity is kind of important here. I would think, and Tony, I'm going to ask you this question. I would think that if there was a special creation, we would not find any evidence on any kind of human chromosome number 2. We would not see the relationships we're seeing. It would be distinct and unique, rather than evidence what we would expect if there's a common ancestor.
Well, if you don't believe that there's a common ancestor, why would you look?
True. Similar morphological
There would be no
characteristics.
reason to even investigate if you don't believe there's a common ancestor.
I mean, and that applies to any kind of thing, though. I mean, right? I mean, any kind of gene. If somebody had mentioned GULAP earlier, and I don't want to go down the whole GULAP thing, but we have traced back the promoter when the promoter was lost. We have found the places where that failed in other species, and we can show via phylogeny. This is what we expect if these things are related in this particular way.
I also want to point out, and you got the references for this. I've already sent them to you via Messenger. That as he was discussing these features, like the duckbill platypus versus a duck, the sonar in bats and all that, I covered that in my intro, and how these things were predicted by evolutionary theory to be coded by different genes than each other, as opposed to what the common assumption is that the same genes code for the same features, no matter what the creature is or what the organism is. And so it's interesting that it brings that up as if it's just something casual to notice. We would have, and in his defense, we would have noticed this anyway had we looked. The difference is it was predicted before we looked. So there you go.
Okay.
Well, the point is that it has been predicted, but when you looked, did you really find two fused genes or not? This is a thing.
Well, clearly, yes. But
just to wrap up a very fast point here. If we adopt a model of random mutations that has brought up humans from an ancestral great ape, then again, according to the theory, we should expect a very smooth and gradual gradient.
Why?
Of great apes that have human features, which we don't have.
Why would you expect to get a gradual gradient?
Neanderthals are more human than apes. Where are the apes that exhibit a gradient of human intellect, human speech, and human free will? Why don't we have apes?
This is another whole set of conversations that should be debated at a different time.
Because this is the prediction of the theory.
That is not a prediction of the theory.
Yeah, that's not a prediction I'm familiar with either.
Right? So if they are happening randomly, they are building human traits gradually. This one random mutation after that random mutation after the other random mutation. So we shouldn't find abruptly humans who have the intellect to take on this conversation while we have the best great ape, which is the chimp, is still eating bananas and sitting on trees. Where are the great ape civilizations that have inscriptions on caves and that have built cities and that have built villages and that have built boats? We don't have these things.
We have a lot of them. They're called. There's a lot of like Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo habilis. These are all humans that are apes. Those are apes.
Those are not apes.
They are apes. They're literally apes. They're in the same group as apes.
I'm looking for creatures that are like chimps. That are
Why would you expect that? I know no evolutionist theory in the world that would say something like that. None.
Of course, because when there is a gap in the theory, when there is an obvious gap, people just look the other side.
Oh, okay.
Why don't we just?
Okay, so I want to make sure that we're clear here. You're saying that the evolution makes a prediction that evolution theory never makes nor would make.
Can you go again?
You're saying that evolutionary theory is making some odd prediction about apes that it would never make, and because it doesn't make that, you think that's a flaw in the theory, because it makes no sense to make that prediction.
I'm saying that the mathematical consequence of having a model based on random mutations is that any change has to be gradual. I'm also saying, not only me, Darwin said that there should be innumerable transitions, so it is not only me who is saying. And this is why you are looking for transitionary fossils all the time, because you should expect transitions. Now, traits like human beings should give great survival advantage to the extent that the real transitionary links between human beings and apes should not be a Lucy that is extinct. It should be great apes who have language, who have free will, and who have intellect.
I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to. Yeah, I just don't understand why this even makes sense.
Because this is what gradient is about, Steve.
No, I understand gradient and punctual equilibrium, and I get all these concepts, but I don't know anywhere in evolutionary theory what you just said would ever be something that's even remotely makes sense or predicted. It's just not. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, so no one is making these predictions that you are claiming.
Because they're
not... no one is making them because they do not exist on the ground.
Do you know why? No, do you?
That's okay.
The reason no one is making them is that that's not how evolution works. That's why they're not making them.
It would be akin to me saying, hey, look,
isn't how it works.
I'm going to make the prediction that gravity predicts that if I drop this, it's going to float up to space. That's a weird prediction. It doesn't.
why are paleontologists looking for a missing link then? Because you
What?
expect that there will be a missing link.
What is a missing link?
Okay,
Why do you make a festival when you find Lucy? Why?
Well, wait, hang on, wait. What is a missing link? Because I've heard that term since I was a kid in the 70s, and it has no value then. It has no value now. So what is a missing link?
Why is there any seeking for a transitionally fossil altogether? Why?
Tony?
Wait, he's asking why is there seeking for a
Transitional
Of
form.
transition altogether. Why? Isn't it because we expect that there are gradual transitions, or what?
we wouldn't say gradual, but we definitely would expect a midway point between two potential expressions of morphology. So like I pointed out, when we look at Ellesmere Island, Nunavut, we saw one fossil, we saw another one. And if we were going to test the hypothesis that one is related to the other, one perhaps is descended from the other, we should expect to find that a transitional between them.
Yeah.
And but that doesn't mean it was gradual.
So I am putting this to you. If there is a transition, would it only be transition in the shape of the skeletal structure and the shape of how the thumb is the morphology of the hand and the thumb and it's standing straight? Or there should also be transition in terms of the brain capacity and language capacity?
That would depend on the immediate environment.
I'm sorry?
yeah, it's not
That
necessarily.
would depend on the immediate environment.
The selective pressures.
Evolution doesn't have a goal. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
to make you smarter. And to be very frank, there are certain organisms on the planet that make a case for us to say that maybe intelligence isn't really the key to success as a biological organism. Perhaps it is, but
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't mind, except that the objective is already achieved. Human beings exist, so the ultimate goal.
But if the selective pressures change, we wouldn't, right? We could. Do you agree that we could become an extant species anytime if the selective pressures change and we could not adapt as a species to it? We would die out.
We will probably kill ourselves.
Well,
not
okay,
the environment.
fine, but I mean, biologically speaking, we are mammals. Mammals have they have an expectant death time. I mean, mammals don't last very long as a species as compared to like some other populations as a whole.
I don't mind if the environment changes and we go away, but this is not the issue. The issue is we have reached intelligence. Intelligence has definitely helped us survive and colonize this planet, and we're now thinking of colonizing other planets. Now, it is obvious that intelligence has worked fine for us because we have reproduced and multiplied and occupied this whole place, and we're destroying it. Now, for those great apes that we are putting in cages in zoos now, okay, we are looking for the change in morphology. We are putting all those skeletons here and there. Here is the change in morphology. Here is how it happened. Here is this one becoming more straight, and this is
we
how
have
it
no
changed.
idea how those other apes are going to change a million years from now. None.
Did the sudden change in human brain weight and the complexity of human intellect come as a spurt? And why? Is it a single mutation that caused it? It is not.
Actually, there were a couple mutations that were involved. Actually,
Yeah,
there were a couple mutations involved in the involved in how the so like the other great apes have a sagittal crest because there are muscles that attach from like the top of their head to their jaw, and this is why they have such powerful jaws. But we had a pseudogenization of some of the muscles involved in that, or some of the genes which or contribute to building the muscles involved in that, which is why our brain ballooned in size, because we don't have the muscles constraining our cranium size anymore. And so, yes, we do know some of the genes involved in that. Also, there was a triple duplication of one of the genes involved in brain size.
I don't mind. I'm an engineer. You have those 3 genes. You say that they are responsible. Why don't we do a gene insertion or use CRISPR-Cas9 to do genetic change?
We actually have. We have done that with marmosets. We have done that with marmosets, actually.
Excellent.
Well, not intelligence per se, but it does make the brain larger.
Yes.
Wasn't it was it a marmoset or something else? It was one single gene made the difference.
We're not looking at a larger brain. We're looking at a brain that actually thinks like humans.
Well,
Where is the gradient?
if it has more synapses, if it's larger, it uses more power and higher wattage. Who knows what can happen? You know, we're in the preliminary. CRISPR-Cas9 has not been around very long. First of all, we don't ever want to get that in the germline. We don't know the ramifications of that due to gene linkage. So we're doing experiments, but I think we're at the beginning stages of that. 1,000 years from now, who the hell knows? We might have a marmoset that be able to play chess with you. Who the hell knows? Right. But that's through artificial
but also,
means.
we don't even know everything about the brain, about the structure of the brain and how intelligence is generated and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, it's again, that's not something we expect to understand fully right now. So right now we're just at the stage of what genes are correlated with what parts of our body and things like that. And then a higher process like intelligence, we need to understand that at a way better level before we can even start trying to understand this in other organisms.
I have a quick question from the live chat.
I agree with
and then I want to get back to Tony.
I agree.
To make sure that Tony has asked everything he wants to talk about, because again, I think Tony's right. A lot of this was over in 20 minutes into this. I'm trying to be fair, but I'm not seeing the answers to some of these questions. But somebody had asked to Finding Truth, your claim is that something can be discovered without ever knowing the theory of evolution, like the treatment of a particular amoeba. It cannot be a prediction of evolution. However, you give credence to relativity as it makes better predictions than Newtonian gravity. But theoretically, we could have accidentally discovered all the things that make relativity. See, so to me, the fact that we could have discovered something without evolution wouldn't be a valid critique. Discoveries can be made by accident, but theories like evolution allow us to make directed discoveries. So a theory allows us to make consistent predictions based upon observations that explain as well as make repeatable and testable predictions. Right? Would you agree with that?
So when you go about with something like relativity and you say how much I want to synchronize a clock on a satellite so that the relativistic change in time dilation due to gravity, we do not guess. We do a calculation and we do a calibration of the clock. So a theory that does not make you guess is a theory that has predictive power. But if somebody says, okay, according to the theory, we need to try those 100 options. This is not a theory. Then you are not making, there is no predictive power at all. You're just guessing. If you're guessing, forget theories now. It's guesswork. It's, trying things out. It's trial and error. So this is what I'm saying. If we are claiming that we will accept evolution defined in this specific thing, that the origin of species comes from a common ancestor that has happened by successive modifications that are driven by random mutations and filtered through natural selection, sorry, this provides no practical benefit to humanity. It has a philosophical depth. It has a philosophical depth for explaining why we are here and if there is purpose or not. Obviously, it asserts that there is no purpose whatsoever. But it is not a theory that is serving us as humans. This is the point of the discussion. It is also not making predictions other than finding predictions to support its own self, but not to serve humanity. This is the point of the discussion. Now, if we look at what the theory should be predicting, the theory is totally focusing, like what Tony has mentioned, on specific morphologies, while completely ignoring that those morphologies also have real effects on reality. So the difference in human brain size, we know that the humans do not have the largest brain. I think that some whales have brains that are much heavier than humans. Why are they not more intelligent than us? So it is not about finding some genes that
you realize
give the creative...
it's not brain size. You realize it's not brain size that it correlates. It's not brain size that correlates with intelligence. It's encephalization quotient, right?
We don't know that.
Well, actually, there's a very good correlation between the encephalization quotient and intelligence rather than just brain size.
Fine, because you just said now that we can make a chimp having a heavier brain, and then the quotient of his brain weight versus his body weight will be better, right? But it's not getting more intelligent, is it? It's not getting human intelligence.
We have our brain is like 3 times the size of the other great apes. This is a question of encephalization quotient, not just brain size, right? If you say a blue whale has a huge brain, why is a blue whale not the super smartest animal on the planet? Because it's not just about brain size, right?
Well, it depends really about how intelligence is manifested in the first place, and how much of those synapses are really for
Sure.
control of motor, and how much of them is really related to thinking processes. And we don't know that. We don't
Sure.
know anything
Fair.
about this. Testing the theory here
Which is
you're always
also what I said earlier.
changes in morphology. Where is the change in intellect? Why is there no gradient there? Where is the gradient about speech power? Where is the gradient about free will? Why do animals comply to rules and regulations all the time, and we have free will?
If we were able
These
to
are the big questions.
hang on, I got an echo. If we were able to study the predecessors of modern Homo sapiens sapien, we would see possibly these types of things. Obviously, we don't have the availability to do that because they're just fossils. We have a super chat real quick. Jamie Russell, $5. No accident. Science is based upon God belief. Who gets credited for the scientific method? God won.
Right.
Okay, so
Okay.
I mean, we got to start wrapping this up. Tony, where do you want to go with this? Because again, you had a really good presentation, and I think there's a lot of points being raised about the actual topic. Does evolution make beneficial predictions? I haven't seen anything yet to say that it doesn't. I mean, there are actual evidences of it making beneficial predictions. I don't see anything that creationism predicts. But where do you want to take us out with as far as anything else you want to talk about?
Well, the whole idea of this was, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase Finding Truth on this. When we discussed this, the idea was to put this out there and let the audience decide on what they believe. I didn't know we were going to do a vote, because ultimately that just means my bias audience versus his bias.
Oh yeah,
audience.
those are just straw polls. Don't even worry about that.
But what I did want to do is actually get this out there to show that when we're talking about science, this is my point about everything, is that science has practical applications. That's the only thing that we should be discussing when it comes to science. As far as the way it's taught, we should be taught how to use it as we're going along. A lot of people don't realize that in college courses, you're actually taking lab classes along with your classes, with your scholastic classes. So the point of this, though, was to get this information out there. I don't really care about debating Ahmed anymore. Sorry about that. I do mean to get your name right. I'd rather, talk to the audience here, because I'm sure they have questions about what I've said, if they want me to support anything, if anything needs to be clarified, because I'm not here to convince one person. I'm here to convince the people in the chat right now.
No, and I look, that's why I have these discussions as well. I love that point. Let me ask this question real quick. And I do get all your citations, Tony, but I'm going to tell you it's going to take me a while to put them into the video description because they're so long and I have to trim them down. If not, they're all going to fit. So I'll figure out how to do that after this renders and stuff. Intrigue Feline asks, though, at what point does a series of lucky guesses based on a framework no longer become lucky guesses?
That's a good question. Do you want?
Either.
I'm assuming that's
both.
Pointed at Finding Truth.
I think it's both.
I would say at no point does it become a fact, but at some point in time, you're going to have to notice a correlation between prediction and confirmation. I don't know what that point is, and I think it's going to be different for every single prediction that's out there. But the fact is, evolution makes a lot of predictions, and they keep converging on that. And again, creationism doesn't make predictions, and we're not talking about what's truth. We're talking about what has real world applications, or what makes beneficial predictions. So that's where I stand on it. I don't have really anything else to put into that.
Okay, Ahmed. Brevity.
Okay,
brevity.
So just wrap up on this. We have a theory that claims that randomness is driving life, and that blind process called natural selection that has no objective function and no target and no goal is filtering it, which ends up with a random process that should average to zero mathematically. And then this theory says, okay, if you don't accept me in terms of realism, accept me because I'm making useful predictions to you. And the case I have presented here is that those predictions are not a product of this theory. They are a product of other work that has been occurring for years and years and decades in other established sciences like genetics, epigenetics, taxonomy and phylogeny, etc., which are independent sciences that have been practically hijacked under this big umbrella, which is irrelevant to it. If this theory goes away, nothing will change in practice. For humans, the only aspect of this theory is a philosophical aspect, which is not the area of scientific theories. I think this theory should go away, and human beings should look into how life really progresses, and randomness is not the way that life is progressing. It is not what we see in operation.
I think all modern medicine would change if we didn't have this theory. We wouldn't be able to make predictive things even on vaccines. So I don't think that follows. But William Light asked, will you ask him, and I assume he means finding truth, to briefly talk about briefly talk. You ask him, he to ask finding truth. Yeah, no offense, but brevity is not in his nature. To briefly talk about teleological versus teleonomy for us, which I think you went over a little bit last time. But if you want to touch on that, I'm not sure why it's relevant. But you want to take 30 seconds to maybe, or
can you re-paraphrase the question?
Yeah, he wants to know teleologic versus teleonomy, and this is the basis behind the more of the Darwinian mechanisms of what Darwin discovered is that we didn't need a teleological explanation. We can say, look, this has the appearance of design, but through natural causations and teleonomy, we can actually show why the thumb is designed to grip something, right? Because I'm fine with design. I have no issue with saying, hey, look, the hand is designed to grip something. Yes, that's what it does. It grips. We have opposable thumbs. It's by design, but that design was by nature through multiple iterations, and selective pressures. No problem with that. That's teleonomic design. Let me rephrase this question, if I can, a little bit. If God didn't exist, why would it make a difference if the teleonomic explanation explains?
If God didn't exist, why would it make a difference to whom?
To us. I mean, if teleonomy explains certain things, why do we need a teleological explanation of somehow like God is behind all this?
If all what we want to do is to invoke that all what we have is apparent design, which is what I think what he means by teleonomy here.
Yes.
Not real design, then I don't think anything makes sense, because for us today to design a robot that looks like a human being or a cat or even a butterfly or a fly or anything or an ant, it takes so much design. So if the real thing is not design, I think we should doubt our minds as human beings. And maybe the only way to doubt our minds is to believe that our minds are products of randomness. Maybe we're not thinking straight altogether. So if this is not teleology, it means we're not thinking straight. And somebody at a point sent me something about something called the Salem hypothesis. And it says that medical doctors and engineers are more posited to consider intelligent design. And my response is, if the two professions that are really serving the practical aspect of human health and human practical applications see design in life, this stands for something, in my opinion.
All right.
I tried.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. You answered the question, I think. But Jackson, do you want to weigh in on that real quick?
Oh, yeah, as I just said in the article, I think you're missing the point of that hypothesis, because the people who do not see design are the biologists, the geologists, the paleontologists. Yeah, the people who are actually doing the research.
But, yeah.
Okay.
But in the laboratory,
the people
that's how you do it.
Yeah. Who are doing the research, by and large, are not the ones who see intelligent design. Right? As Steve said, there's natural design. Okay. But the people who work around things that are man-made and their job is to make things to benefit people, they are, it makes sense, predisposed to see conscious design in nature. So that doesn't really surprise me. But that's the point of that hypothesis. I think you kind of missed the point of that one.
All right. Well, I mean, he does have a background in engineering, so he might be.
I agree that this is the point. I'm arguing that the result of this hypothesis is that people who work with design are more positioned to see
that's
design.
The point.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm also saying that I'm also saying that regardless of whether there is design or not, or whether an intelligence is behind it, evolution still makes beneficial predictions.
We still use it. I mean, there's no. Well, I mean, I find it odd that you had said something along the lines of we appeal to all these other things like genetics, phylogeny, all these other things, which is part of evolutionary theory. It's incorporated that for a reason, because that's how evolutionary theory makes predictions, with the understanding that we have common ancestry and that we can use to look at through phylogenetics, through proteomics, through morphological similarities. All these things go into that. It's like saying, hey, I want to have the theory of relativity, but I don't want to talk about physics. I don't want to talk about math. I don't want to talk about, kinematics. It's all these things are part of that theory.
Yeah, phylogenetics is the study of the evolutionary relationships among organisms. That's the definition of that field. That's what phylogenetics is.
Does that make sense, Ahmed?
But you can build
The definition.
But you can build phylogenetic trees based on homoplacies. You do not need to assume common ancestry. Common ancestry
but if you build the trees, it shows
You can,
common
but they're
ancestry.
not right.
If you build the trees
but they're not right.
Well, hang on. If you build the trees and you base it on even on proteomics, we can actually show common ancestry.
I mean, I was arguing on another note that you build common ancestry, but when you really look at the phylogenetic trees, you find that the real creatures that are either extant or have fossils are sitting at the rim of the tree. So where are all the ancestors?
Dead.
This might be another
Fossils.
Yeah, they're largely dead. Yeah.
Most was it 99% of every species that ever lived is extinct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why are 100% of the creatures sitting at the rim of the tree? So we would
Because
expect
we're the ones that
99
survived through the selective pressures. We're the ones that adapted as populations. That's what natural selection does. That's what evolution would predict.
But the fossils of those who have not survived, okay, are not sitting in our lineage of ancestry. They are sitting at the leaves of the tree of their own lineages. So how come we don't find
Do you know
those?
why?
Why is, if you look at any specific phylogenetic tree, okay, you will find the rim of the tree, the very leaves of the tree, having either extant or extinct creatures. But the rest is empty nodes, including the very first node, Luca.
Not true. Okay, so if we go back to the example that Tony brought up in his opening statement, which was tetrapods, we have look up a phylogeny of stem tetrapods. There are dozens of different fossils on the more fishy side and dozens of fossils on the more tetrapod side. It's not just Eusthenopteron and Tiktaalik. It's also Panderichthys and Acanthostega and Tularpaton and Parmastega, which was just discovered last year, which is between Tiktaalik and Ichthyostega. We're finding more and more and more and more fossils all the time, but there are already dozens. Like just look up an example.
What maybe what I explained was not very clear. What I am saying is, we know that the majority, the theory at least says that the majority, because you couldn't have the theory unless this is an assertion that 99 point something goes extinct. Okay, so we should expect that there are more extinct, much more extinct creatures than extant ones, right? So when you build a phylogenetic
Is that
tree,
unreasonable?
Which is what we find.
no, I'm saying,
And nobody predicted it. We discovered that.
I'm not saying whether it's reasonable or not. Now, I will take this as a given and look at what it should predict. It should predict that when you build a phylogenetic tree, you find plenty of creatures on the branches of the tree, not only at the rims. But the vast majority of the creatures on phylogenetic trees are sitting on the rims, are sitting towards the leaves. Why is this the case? It is not.
Are you asking why
this is not a predictable?
They're still alive.
Hold
Yeah,
on.
they're extant.
Ahmed, can I wait? Are you asking why certain fossils are not considered the common ancestor between certain organisms?
Let me give you a very clear example. Take for example a rabbit or a fox, and let's take the ancestral lineage of the fox, starting from the fox, ending to Luca, and let's see, parsing the phylogenetic tree back to Luca, how many real creatures will we find? And this is
Lots
like what?
and
As
lots.
opposed to
You know, there are dozens of fossils alone just at the split between like the dog and cat lineage.
Yeah, matter of
You've
fact,
ever heard of Dormaliscion?
There's actually a web page you
Hesperus
can go to, and you can put in 2 different species, and it'll tell you how many millions of years ago they disassociated from each other and split. And you can look at and find the relationships to animals that were very similar at the time.
This is exactly what you will find.
It's just
Branching,
predictions.
and then the branch at the
And that's
end of
what's
the
predicted.
branches, there are things.
But those are
There is
extant,
this-
right? I mean, if
They're
the reason that the tips, those
Yes.
are the ones that are extant and survived. That's why they're at the tips. They're still alive.
A
Whether
modern
they're
organism is
vital-
not going to be situated somewhere deep in the tree simply because it is a modern organism.
Yes.
It is currently living.
I have no objection.
Yes.
I am.
Okay. All right.
I mean, would you
All
expect trilobites to be at the edge of the phylogenetic tree? Because I wouldn't think that would be expected, because they've been long since extinct, several hundreds of millions of years ago.
I'm saying that the ancestors of whatever arbitrary creature that you take, okay, you will not find them on its lineage. We know that a fox at a point of time was an amphibian creature, at a point of time was an aquatic creature, at a point of time was a unicellular organism. There was something that morphed. There was something. But all what you find
Okay.
on the phylogenetic tree is the branching and something at the end of the branch. Start with a fox or with any arbitrary animal that you can take that is currently existing, or even with an extinct animal that sits at the end of the tree, and parse the tree back to Luca and tell me how many of the innumerable transitions that you find. Now, if you find 1 or 2, the question is, why are they 1 or 2? Or why are they
Because
nil?
not everything fossilizes, but we
it is very
have
strange.
quite a bit more than that.
Man,
I would ask you to do the exercise yourself, and Jackson and Tony, and maybe Jackson. We discussed this when we discussed
Okay.
the Cambrian.
Can I screen share for a moment?
Tony's okay.
Okay. So
yeah, we can, but we
You're-
we got this. We're almost at 3
I know.
hours. We're like 2.5 hours.
you're right.
now.
You're right.
do
We
need
should
to
just
get the audience
we could just
in.
cut it.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I
I
wanted
mean,
to ask
and
you.
I got this is the weekend,
think-
man. I should be.
I think we should take
But you're
that
having so much
forward when
fun.
this.
Yeah, and we do have to have more brevity here. All right, so let me ask the live chat there. You got some questions for Tony or Ahmed here? Ask in the live chat there. We will see if we can ask them. I asked as many as I could that I've seen that were like the more interesting ones. So we
Jamie Russell actually brought up one that that Ahmed didn't bring up, which is Russell Humphreys. So basically, what she put something about how I meant Jamie. Oh, Jamie's a he.
Yeah, Jamie's a he. He's a younger
I'm
creationist.
so
too.
sorry, dude.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry.
He's really cool.
So
He's
sorry.
not going to care. But go ahead. He's actually a young
Anyway,
creationist I get along with very well.
Okay, well, he pointed out that Russell Humphreys predicted the magnetic fields of the planets, and the actual claim is that he not only predicted them, but he did so more accurately than NASA did. Now, I've actually looked into that. So if Jamie wants to go ahead and post like a specific planet he wants to talk, I'm just going to go over them until I'm told otherwise. There's what, 9 planets, 8 planets? Well, if you're going to continue,
Pluto's a planet. Don't say otherwise. I'll boot you.
Okay.
I'm a Plutoist.
All right. So
Pluto.
initially, he didn't predict the magnetic field of the Earth, but he did base the rest of his predictions based on magnetic field of the Earth and the theory that all creation started off as gigantic balls of water. That's a gross oversimplification, but we only have so much time. When it came to Earth, he didn't really predict that. He used data that I've since shown in a video of mine on all the planets that was refuted. But from there, he said that he predicted that the moon had no magnetic field, or that it had a magnetic field in the past, and NASA was completely oblivious to it. This was in 1984. What he didn't realize, apparently, is that in 1969, NASA had actually measured the magnetic field in rocks, indicating that there had been a magnetic field on the moon. So he was wrong there. When it comes to the sun, again, there was he was predicting some kind of change in the magnetic, turned out incorrect. correct measurements show the sun's magnetic field oscillates considerably. From there, they went to Mercury. Mercury, he claims he predicted Mercury more accurately than NASA, when in fact NASA's initial measurements had what's called an error bar. He chose to use the lower end of the error bar instead of the entire end error bar, which would have made the actual measurements completely consistent with NASA's predictions. From there, Mars has no magnetic field the same as Venus. They both have no magnetic field. Humphreys claimed that he predicted before NASA that both of those planets had magnetic fields. NASA already knew that. They measured them when they went to those planets over a decade before Russell Humphreys ever even addressed them. We then come to Saturn and Jupiter. Both of them were measured directly by NASA before Humphreys ever published. The only planet that he actually did make a prediction of that was remotely accurate was Uranus. And the reason why is there was no radiation, or there was no radio signal coming from Uranus at the time. And so an actual flyby, his prediction was somewhere between the magnetic field of Earth's and Saturn, which is pretty obvious considering it's right there in between the size of Earth and Saturn. So he predicted that entire range. The NASA scientists predicted a much smaller range that was very close and somewhat overlapping where Uranus's actual field is. He claims that he was more accurate. He wasn't. He just spitballed a random amount. So Jamie, that is the my summation of Russell Humphreys' work. You're welcome to go find my video there. It's called Planetary Magnetic Fields. And in that, you can find all the references for everything I've said, including the papers that NASA published, and even Russell Humphreys pointing out that NASA had already published these results. He just thought his model was better.
And to throw out there on that. I don't know why I said throw out there on that. I have been in touch with Russell Humphreys for a very long time, and it has been established that in his work that he wrote for the Journal of Creation on the helium diffusion rates of the Felton zircons, that he had a mathematical error. That he did a few of them. He one place. He took a mathematical formula that was well established for diffusion rates and changed it from a natural logarithm to a 10 base 10 logarithm, just so it gets closer to what he said was his predictions. That's not allowed. And then he had a flat out derivation that was completely wrong. That has been checked by multiple people. Dr. Loschelt, who has a PhD in solid state physics, had pointed it out. He had written to another journal and had got his paper published showing that Humphreys had a very, very simple math error. Now, I don't like to say that somebody's like dishonest. I just find it very odd that Russell Humphreys, who has a legit PhD in astrophysics, would make a serious fundamental flaw in mathematics just to comport with his position that younger creation, it must be the case. Because when I had asked him one time in regards to a similar thing on the Fenton zircons, I had asked about the heat dissipation rates when it comes to how we account for the amount of energy that's released for all this amount of radioactivity that would have to be the case if the Earth is only 6,000 years old. And his response was accelerated decay. And so when I asked him, well, what is this evidence of accelerated decay? And the very nominal evidence that exists for anything remotely the source would only be towards very specific types of atoms like beryllium 7 and 8. But there's a certain isotope that will allow for that, and there's what's called K capture. But when I asked him, what's your evidence for accelerated decay? He didn't throw any of that out. What he said was, it has to exist because there could be no other way because the Earth is 6,000 years old. That tells you what kind of scientist he is. So I just wanted to put that out there. I have nothing against the guy. I get along with Humphreys quite well, even though he's very belligerent. But he will put his religion and his faith ahead of the science at every turn, and manipulate math to do it. If you don't believe me, I can give you those links to the journals where his math was corrected, and I don't know if he's accepted or not. We have a super chat real quick. Stefan Lysane for 10 Canadian. Tony says that creationism does not have testable predictions. One testable prediction, which is confirmed, is longitudinal EM waves. How does evolution account for longitudinal EM waves inside DNA? First of all, I don't know what that's to do with evolution, but Tony?
Well, it would have to have something to do with evolution if it was in DNA. I would think. I could be wrong about that. But,
genetics, maybe, but I mean,
yeah, perhaps. But
I mean, I'm sure that it does have a resonance, but I don't know what that has to do with DNA. I mean, if you want to have magnetic resonance that has a longitudinal wave, sure, of course.
Well, here's the thing. I haven't seen this prediction. I haven't seen where the prediction is from creationism. I apologize. Stephen, was that? What was the name?
Steve.
I apologize,
Yeah.
Stefan. I actually have not read that paper. I'd be happy to and get back to you if you want to, send it to me. I'll be glad to read it. But I haven't seen that. I haven't even heard a creationist talk about longitudinal electromagnetic waves, and I don't know why they would be in DNA in the first place.
It'd be for magnetic resonance. That's all.
Okay. Well,
So
I'd love to see how somebody deduced that there would be longitudinal electromagnetic waves from just the assumption that the universe was created in a singular creation event or that the world was intelligently designed. I'd love to know how they figured that out.
That'd be an interesting question, actually. How did creationists even, come up with those types of things? Well, I mean, it wasn't creationists that discovered things like epigenetics either, or Evo Devo, or none of that stuff. And I just don't see any predictability from it whatsoever. I didn't hear anything that would say, "Hey, look, under the creationist model, if this was the case, we would expect this." But go ahead and take a few minutes to just wrap it up there. I know, Tony, you've got to get here going. We've gone way over than should. I want to thank Jackson Wheat for dropping in. Always a pleasure. Ahmed, great
Thanks,
talking to you as always. I think we're going to have to work on brevity, though, because a lot of words to say little, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. You're very intelligent. I do not put you in the same category as something like Standing for Truth or Nephilim Free. Don't think that I do. But it's a lot of words to say very little. But Tony, do you want to go last in your wrap up, or?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll go ahead and finish that up.
All right, so Ahmed, go ahead and give us a really brief summation, and then we'll turn over to Tony.
Very briefly, I actually expected Tony to come up with a myriad of practical applications for evolution to serve humankind. I think that just putting on the table one case of a medical practice that was not really a direct consequence of believing of evolution, but rather of the way that medicine is conducted, does not make the case for the theory of evolution in terms of common descent with modification by random mutation and natural selection. It does not make the case for it. I also think that the theory is not well rooted in realism. In short, I think that this theory is neither giving a correspondence to reality, is not coherent, and is not pragmatic in terms of benefiting humanity. I think that this theory is causing a state of laziness and is stopping progress of the humankind, and that we should really look deeper into how life progresses and changes. The real sciences that are looking into that are doing progress. I think that the only thing that is hindering them is the belief that things are going randomly because they're looking in the wrong place. I hope that this theory gets out of the way. I know that there are trials now to revise its mechanisms, and I hope that those trials do not get affected by systemic bias. And because there is a feeling that there is a taboo if things go to the direction of design and information. I think that if this is the reality, we should just give in to it and let truth stand for what it is. I thank Tony for the discussion. He's a smart guy, and he is, I didn't know he has a degree in divinity, and I think that believing in God and believing in science have no contradiction if you believe in a true religion and if you believe in true science. If you're rooted in realism in both aspects, you're well and good. That's all.
All right. Yeah, Stefan, we literally just went over your super chat. I mean, I could read it again. I don't mind, but we just go back about 5 minutes, and we talked about it. It says Tony says that creation does not have a testable predictions. One testable prediction was the confirmed is longitudinal EM waves. How does that account for longitudinal EM waves inside DNA? And Tony's response was that how does creationism predict that? We would understand that there are such things as magnetic resonance principles. We understand that many of that would go into what's called field theory rather than genetics. So I don't know, or rather than evolutionary theory. Evolutionary theory doesn't really discuss any of that stuff. So I think it would be more like physics, but we did actually cover it. If you want to, like, maybe you stepped out for a second. All right, Tony.
Oh, well, first of all, let me go ahead and say thank you to everybody here. Finding Truth, Ahmed, I appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Mostly listening to you, but still pleasure talking to you. Steve, of course, someday I'm going to have a philosophical discussion with you, but I
love you, man. I love you.
I don't want to really, because you know your stuff when it comes to philosophy. I see your chats and I'm afraid on Facebook, and I'm afraid to respond quite often. Jackson, you already know my respect for you, man. So I've enjoyed this group of people immensely. As far as your audience, I just wanted to make sure you guys understood the point of my discussion was not whether or not evolution is true. I happen to believe it is true, but my belief doesn't mean anything. Although I disagree with Ahmed about whether evolution makes beneficial predictions, I also disagree with him that I'm an intelligent guy, and that's the reason why I do my show the way I do. I try to explain things in as dumb a terms as possible so that I can understand them, and hopefully other people will understand it too. And so what I hope you've gotten out of this is, even if evolution is incorrect, if you drive a car, if you wear jewelry, if you use electricity, you are benefiting from the real world applications of assuming an old Earth. If you are, as I've already discussed, the whole Cali thing, all the fossils that we've discovered, essentially, if you're living the life you're living in modern society, you would be absolutely shocked at how much is there because of evolution. But I showed the predictions. I haven't seen I've seen an attempt at a refutation, but with no sources, just particular assertions. So what I hope you guys will do is do your own homework in the end. And especially Stefan, I know you paid for that question, dude. Come to my my channel. You don't have to watch the video. Just text me that question. I'll look it up and I'll get an answer for you. And that's kind of the way I work anyway. If you give me a question, I'm weird about that. I'll go research it. Doesn't mean I'm smart, but I am damn persistent, and I will get the information. So
I gave you your Twitter.
Hopefully I've made my case. Thank you. Hopefully I've made my case. I believe I did. So I just want to wish you guys all a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you, man. And by the way, on record, I love your channel so much, it's ridiculous. The way you're able to do summations, and that's my style. I mean, you and I are very similar in that approach. We're not experts in these particular topics by any stretch of imagination, but we are diligent, and we read, and we want to be able to explain things to other people. And that way, if we figure we're just as, schmuckatellis can understand this stuff and explain it, then any schmuckatelli can understand it. That's my approach to my entire channel. Okay. So
exactly.
I get it. I totally get it.
Steve,
yes,
pardon that. I definitely have to thank you for the moderation. And as usual, it was nice moderation, I think, and even including the interventions. And
I appreciate it. You just go long sometimes. I think you recognize that. But nobody's going to detract from the knowledge that you have. And by the way, love to have you on to talk about engineering one of these days or something. Or math.
Heck yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yep.
So, we just don't have to do biology. So, yeah.
Thanks to Jackson for dropping in, and thank you for all of the questions and comments and everything. I enjoyed it, actually. I really enjoyed this.
Jackson, again, is one of my favorite people on the planet.
If I took longer in some of the comments.
That's fine. So I guess there is planning to be an after show. I think Cheshire, you want to run it on your channel, please be my guest. I might pop in, I may not, but if Jackson wants to, or Dapper, or just continue on the conversation, by all means, set it up, get the link, and I'll put it in the video description. But other than that, guys, these are awesome. We are going to be doing things like this more. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, Ahmed will be back again to talk about the Cambrian explosion with Jackson Wheat. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'll be back again to talk about Cambrian explosion with Jackson. I think it's gonna be Sunday. It's Sunday 14th?
I think on the 14th we said, Ahmed, are you going to be my T jump for modern day debate? It's everything. Ahmed's going to come in and talk about everything. Hey, we're having a discussion on cosmology. Ahmed's going to come in. We're going to be talking about mathematical Platonism. Ahmed's going to come in. It's going to be great.
People love you as a moderator. I don't know. So you're a popular
I don't know why.
guy.
No, I appreciate it, man. I love doing that, and I like the fact that on this particular channel, it's not just moderation. It's we all get involved in these discussions. Because everybody. These discussions are for everybody, and I think Tony hit the nail on the head. It's not to convince one person. It's for the audience to get something out of it and go look into it after the fact, and maybe change their positions and get more informed on these particular topics. That's the reasons why I think all of us do these things. So
yeah, I will take the opportunity to invite some of the people to my channel too, like Tony said, and it's just YouTube/C/Finding Truth channel. Finding Truth channel. That's
there's in the video description. So
yeah,
I'm notoriously bad at promoting my channel. So
yeah, we all suck at that for some reason. Our ability to promote is horrible.
I'm terrible at it.
I know we all suck at it.
Ahmed, though, you're pretty good at it, though.
Yeah, hey Ahmed, get a shout out to Tony Reed, Jackson, and myself. We need the promotion. We'll use you for that. We don't mind. Get some theists to watch our stuff. That's great. Promote us. I'm gonna go eat, and then I will pop over to Cheshire's after show. I would love to see Jackson and Dapper over there. That'd be great. There's a lot of different things.
I can't guarantee I'll be there, but I'll try.
That's good. All right, so give it about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes at the most. Or minimum, I don't know, but that's noon my time. But I do want to take a little breather here. But I want to thank you, gentlemen. I want to thank Jackson for coming in at short notice, and I want to thank the audience as usual. Love these discussions, and we hope to have some more. And with that, we'll see you on the after show in about 15 minutes, hour, whenever Cheshire schedule it. Peace.